The long legs of the beautiful nurse immediately changed Lin Hao's plans. He decided to go back to the clinic. The unshaven man was no longer hoping for a miracle after his foster daughter's words, and was lazily picking his nose while waiting for customers. Suddenly he saw a young man carrying a large backpack with a white cross on it. The director was immediately delighted. Lin Hao absent-mindedly searched for the girl with his gaze. The man demanded her name and gender. The young man leaned close to him. Scratching his chin, the boy puzzledly asked the headmaster at what point he looked like a woman. Wu Jianyao closed his eyes and exclaimed irritably that Lin Hao was being too eloquent. He inquired about what was bothering him. The young man raised his eyebrows upward in bewilderment and replied that he felt fine. He was perfectly fine. This guy was starting to seriously annoy the man. He angrily asked why Lin Hao had come to the clinic in the first place. Long legs wouldn't get out of the guy's head. He honestly admitted that he had come here to see the doctor. The principal jumped out from behind his desk and shouted that the young man himself had just said that he was perfectly fine. The boy felt foolish and smiled. He couldn't find a decent reason that would allow him to linger here. Suddenly, he saw a notebook with hiring records. A life-saving thought immediately popped into his head. Lin Hao smiled politely and said that he would like to work at this clinic. He really liked it here. In fact, he was only interested in the nurse's long legs. It was because of them that the young man entered this building. Wu Jianyao smirked and said that their wages were low. It didn't even cover the cost of food and rent. The working day lasts at least 9 hours. In addition, the company does not provide employees with insurance or housing. Lin Hao thoughtfully said that their medical clinic provides terrible conditions for employees, but he agreed. The man folded his hands on the table in front of him and asked impatiently when the young man could begin his duties. The boy was just waiting for that. He straightened up and cheerfully replied that he was ready to start working right away. The director smirked and suggested that he start seeing patients, and in the meantime, he himself would get some sleep. Wu Jianyao happily turned around to leave, and only realized at the last moment that there was something wrong here. The specialist would not agree to such conditions. He returned to the employee and angrily asked if he had a bachelor's degree in medicine. The young man surprisingly replied that he did not have a degree. To the principal's surprise, Lin Hao didn't have a diploma or even a medical school graduation certificate. The man got angry and shouted that he should not have cheated him. He sent the young man away to find another job. The guy sighed and admitted that he had traveled all over the village several times, but had never found a clinic better than this one. Suddenly, he heard a thin girl's voice. The girl told her father that there were too many people outside. She noticed the handsome stranger and wondered who he was and why he was at their clinic. Lin Hao looked at the young beauty carefully. Their eyes met. A spark ran between the young people. Their faces involuntarily drew closer to each other. Each of them studied the other's pretty face, for such beauty was to be sought after. The girl was surprised to see the stranger reach down and begin to deify her long and slender legs. She bent down in embarrassment, trying to cover her knees at least a little, and exclaimed that he shouldn't have looked there. Seeing the nurse's large breasts so close, Lin Hao completely lost his mind. His nose started to bleed from excitement. Seeing the lustful and embarrassed face of the young professional who supposedly came to apply for a job, the father immediately understood everything. The principal became furious and demanded that the young man get away immediately before he was beaten to death. Lin Hao realized that things had gotten too serious. He didn't want to get into a fight and was about to leave the clinic. When they saw a young man in a medic's uniform come out of the nurse's station, the two men shouted in one voice that they needed help. A guy in a green shirt was gently carrying an unconscious tall girl in his arms. There was an object stuck in her leg. The man's face was bloody. He begged the doctor to help the unfortunate girl quickly. Lin Hao didn't know what to do. After all, he didn't come here for such occasions at all, but only because of the nurse's beautiful legs. The director heard voices outside and came out. He pushed the young man away and said firmly that he was ready to see the patient. It was clear from the first glance. The beauty had a sharp piece of wood stuck in her leg, and they wouldn't be able to help at the medical center. The young man watched the man out of the corner of his eye. He wondered what the clinic director would say about it. The receptionist said confidently that the wound was too serious to be treated here. We have to take her to the hospital. The young man in the green shirt stated that the ambulance crew was on their way. All they had to do was help the girl hold out until they arrived. Wu Jianyao angrily said that he wasn't going to be responsible for this girl if something went wrong. The man shouted that the girl would simply die if she didn't get medical attention immediately. He looked at the unconscious girl in his arms and exclaimed that she would only have to die because of untreated help. The owner shouted angrily that they should wait outside. If someone died indoors, he would lose all his customers at once. The young man could not believe that this was really happening. He shouted and demanded that he repeat what he had said. Wu Zhenyao looked at the guy perplexedly and rolled up his sleeves. He said that he was willing to fight if the client so desired. The man turned red with anger. Every minute of arguing with this strange doctor could cost the girl her life. Lin Hao felt his pulse and authoritatively stated that with such serious wounds, one should prepare for a funeral instead of waiting for an ambulance. The young man couldn't stand it and roared. He was willing to give anything he was asked to do to keep the girl alive. The director quickly realized that this was very dangerous. He demanded to leave the clinic and wait outside for the paramedics. The nurse perplexedly asked the father how he could say such a thing. The administrator demanded that she not interfere. Lin Hao called the client over to him. He admitted that he knew a little about medicine and asked if he could take on the task of saving the patient. Not believing his luck, the man began to shake the young man by the shoulders and beg for help. Wu Renyao frowned, saying that it was not his employee. The clinic was not responsible for anything. The guy had to admit that he doesn't work here, but will do his best to get the girl back on her feet. The man was faced with a difficult choice. On the one hand, an unqualified medic. But if no help is given, the patient will die. The nurse raised her voice, and that made the difference. The girl said quietly that she trusted the boy. Lin Hao's heart hammered harder. The principal shouted angrily that Zhoulan was a nurse herself and should understand what was involved. The young man hurried the client along. He reminded that the girl wouldn't last long. A decision had to be made now. The man realized that the girl would die without help. Barely holding back tears, he agreed to give the patient into the hands of the guy. Lin Hao demanded to first lay the injured woman on the table. The client carefully complied with the doctor's request. The director angrily demanded that we stop immediately. This clinic belongs to him, so everyone has to get out of here. The visitor immediately ran up to him and grabbed him by the collar. He demanded that he shut up immediately, or the man would be beaten. Lin Hao turned to Zhoulan and asked if this clinic had an operating room. It turned out that there wasn't. Closing his eyes and putting his head down, the young man asked embarrassedly if there was a bed. The nurse blushed. There was no bed either. The boy stated that in that case the only thing left was the table. The girl blushed even more and replied that everything was a bit shabby. Lin Hao turned his head to the others and demanded that all outsiders leave the room and not enter without his permission. Two attendants led the director, who was desperately trying to break free and stay in the clinic, out under his arms. The young man noticed that the guy in the green shirt had not left the room, and said that he was concerned too. The man replied that he was very worried. Lin Hao raised his eyebrows in surprise and assumed that the patient was the young man's girlfriend. The client confusedly replied that it wasn't like that at all. In fact, it was his sister, and he was very worried about her. The doctor shrugged and opened the knife. If he wanted to stay indoors, no one would dissuade him. With a confident movement, the young man began to cut the clothes on his patient's chest. In his brother's opinion, this was too much. Turning purple with anger, the young man shouted indignantly that he didn't have to do that. The wound wasn't there at all. Meanwhile, the doctor used a folding knife to free the girl from her clothes. Only her black panties remained on. The doctor looked thoughtfully at the half-naked patient. There were many bruises and open wounds all over her body. The young man indignantly wailed that the medic was incompetent and cut all his clothes, even though the wound was only on his leg. Lin Hao replied that he just didn't understand anything. Clothes squeeze the body and impair blood circulation. He added that medics do not pay attention to the gender of the patient. Zhoulan was delighted with the doctor's quick movements. The guy screamed that his sister's life was in his hands, and if he lied, he wouldn't get away with it. Lin Hao put the knife to the girl's underwear and stated that he was going to take it off as well. He began to slowly cut the last piece of clothing. The guy immediately left the room. This was too much. The doctor demanded that the nurse close the door. He needed to concentrate. He quickly listed all the components that needed to be prepared. In addition, a large needle and a dropper were needed. Zhoulan was surprised at how quickly the medic became serious. She readily brought out a needle of saline. The embarrassed girl furtively watched over the doctor's shoulder to see what Lin Hao was going to do with the patient. The young man immediately turned to her and asked if there was anything unusual on his face. Zhoulan replied that it was normal. The guy assumed she wasn't feeling well. The girl shouted that she was fine. The medic demanded that the equipment be prepared quickly. The nurse readily brought the necessary medication and only now noticed the reddened spot on the patient's arm. She confusedly told Lin Hao that the needle insertion site was shattered. She didn't understand how to proceed now. The doctor smiled broadly and blushed. He liked that Zhoulan remembered his name, even though she had only heard it once. After securing the IV, the nurse looked thoughtfully at the naked patient and decided to cover her up so the doctor wouldn't be distracted. She found a small blue sheet and carefully covered the girl's body, covering her breasts and legs. Lin Hao was very unhappy that he would now not be able to face the beautiful naked patient. Running the syringe into the IV, the young man embarrassedly suggested that Jolan was simply jealous of their patient's beautiful figure. The girl involuntarily glanced at the victim's chest and exclaimed that it wasn't true. That wasn't the case at all. The doctor triumphantly declared that the patient's breasts were actually larger than the lovely nurse's bust. He told an embarrassed Jolan that she had wonderful proportions. With size 2 breasts, she had nothing to worry about. The girl took it as an attempt to harass him and angrily kicked him in the face, clasping his nose with his hand. Lin Hao asked his assistant to bring 2 plaques. She asked in surprise as to why it was necessary. The doctor replied that he needed to set the patient's bones. Jolan was surprised that a doctor could do such a thing. She looked at the guy thoughtfully. Lin Hao turned around and exclaimed that she needed to find 2 planks. After setting the broken bones, the young man securely fastened the plaques to the patient's injured hand. He looked at the patient whose leg was still bleeding. At least the arm wasn't something to worry about. Lin Hao lifted the sheet on the girl's legs and said that the most difficult and important thing to do now. Jolan tried to figure out what the doctor was really doing. The medic opened up with a nosebleed. He stated that it was very bad. The nurse was very frightened and worriedly suggested that Lin Hao would not be able to save the patient's life. The young man explained that the girl might be left with a scar after the operation. Afterwards, she would no longer be able to wear a bikini. Jolan was angry. It was important for her to save her patient, and this crazy man was worrying about nothing. The doctor demanded that medical instruments be brought quickly, as well as betadine and saline. The girl watched in amazement as the instruments were in a deep dish in a thick cloud of steam. This was the doctor's way of trying to get rid of viruses. Lin Hao put his hand on the girl's wound. That broken branch was stuck in her leg too firmly. In addition, blood continued to ooze out. The young man frowned, calculating the risks to his patient's health. If he failed, the girl could die. Unfortunately, there was no other option. The doctor regretted that he would have to perform the operation under unsterile conditions. Jolan watched the doctor's actions apprehensively. He quickly pulled out the rest of the bloody branch. The wound immediately began to fountain. A few drops landed on the girl. When she felt the blood on her face, the nurse was even more frightened. She shouted that the patient would bleed out. Lin Hao's clothes were covered in blood. He calmly replied that a lot of blood wouldn't go away. The young man asked Jolan to stop yelling and take a closer look at the wound. He had already stopped the bleeding. The nurse clapped her hands together happily and said admiringly that he had managed to stop the bleeding through acupuncture. The doctor asked glumly for an antitoxin. Unfortunately, it turned out that the clinic didn't have any antitoxin or replacement acid. The young man said angrily that they had nothing. Jolan replied resentfully that they had a small clinic. Lin Hao sighed and assumed that they would at least have half a gram of disinone. The nurse cheerfully replied that they had such medicines. The young man asked to apply pressure to the wound so that the bleeding would not resume. The girl confusedly admitted that she did not know how to do it. The doctor suggested that she perform the operation herself, and he would stop the bleeding. Jolan sighed and walked over to the table. She asked to be shown what to do. The guy guided her hands and said it was very simple. Correcting the assistant's movements, the doctor pressed closer to her from behind. The nurse was very surprised by the doctor's behavior. The girl, embarrassed, stated that she clamped the wound. The young man can continue to carry out the operation. Despite the man's flirtation, he was deadly serious and asked her not to let go of the bleeding spot. Jolan couldn't understand what was really on his mind. She illuminated the wound with her phone screen. Lin Hao said irritably that there was no need to shine the light. He could already see everything. The girl was outraged. Despite the fact that the doctor was performing a complicated operation, he proudly refused to give her additional lighting. The young man smiled and said they were very lucky. The femur was intact. All they need to do is to find where the artery had ruptured. Staring at the surgery in progress, the nurse continued to shine the phone screen despite the doctor's request. Lin Hao turned to the assistant and looked angrily into her eyes. He demanded to turn off the phone immediately. Jolan was unhappy with the doctor's nasty character, but she couldn't help but note his high professionalism. In addition, a nurse called attention to the fact that the doctor was stitching the patient's arteries without equipment or lighting. Lin Hao seemed to sense her gaze and turned his head. The girl was ready to believe that she had met a real wizard. While she held the wound with her hand, the young man quickly and carefully stitched up the injured area. The doctor was relieved that it was all over. All that was left was a stitch. He asked me to wipe his sweat. The girl said angrily that he could do it himself. Lin Hao laughed and admitted that Jolan had figured him out right away. She should be more naive to avoid becoming like her father. The doctor stitched the stitches and went away to admire his work. Years of practice were not in vain. The stitches were smooth and hardly noticeable. The young man exclaimed proudly that he had finished his work. The girl would be perfectly fine now. Jolan placed her palm on the doctor's forehead. At that moment, he felt like the happiest man on the planet. The nurse felt that she had put her hand without a handkerchief and immediately pulled her hand away. She was embarrassed and reproached herself. Lin Hao found a handkerchief in his possession and put it to his forehead, furtively glancing at the embarrassed assistant. He checked the patient's pulse. Her heartbeat was returning to normal. He could only hope that the girl would get back on her feet quickly. The doctor looked at his watch and proudly told Jolan that not even 15 minutes had passed since the operation had begun. The girl said in surprise that for her time was dragging very slowly. It was as if a century had passed since the patient had been brought in. Lin Hao explained that the first time is always like this. When she tries it again, she will realize that it feels good. The nurse blushed and slapped the doctor indignantly. A young man in bloody clothes finally opened the clinic door and solemnly announced that the operation was over. The man began to ask how the operation had gone. The director watched their dialogue skeptically. He gloatingly stated that the kid couldn't be trusted. He couldn't perform the surgery. The kid probably just finished the patient off. The client shouted indignantly that there was no such thing. Lin Hao said that he had managed to restore the patient's life. The director gloatingly listed all the girl's symptoms and stated that it was impossible to save her. The young man could not believe that the old man knew everything and left her to die. At this moment, Jolan came out of the clinic and confirmed the doctor's words. The girl was fine. The administrator couldn't believe it. Lin Hao carelessly said that they could wait for the ambulance now, and he had nothing more to do here. The girl and her father looked at him with a puzzled expression. The nurse caught up with the young man and tugged on his sleeve. She asked him not to leave. The boy smiled and assumed that they wanted to keep him for dinner. Already in a serious tone, Lin Hao said that he was very hungry. He needed to find somewhere to eat as soon as possible. The girl offered to have dinner at her place. The interlocutor said embarrassedly that he had nowhere to sleep. Jolin said confusedly that he could stay with her. The boy immediately became cheerful and asked joyfully if she was joking. The girl immediately blushed and exclaimed that Lin Hao had misunderstood her, but he still shouldn't leave the clinic. Wu Jianyao incredulously inquired how he managed to save the girl. The young man said that it was already getting dark. He had to go. The brother of the rescued girl shouted after him that he would give him any amount of money. The doctor turned his head and said that 30,000 would be enough. The young man began to frantically rummage through his backpack. He said that even 300,000 wouldn't be enough. Lin Hao thought that the client was very rich. The man bewilderedly pulled out some banknotes and admitted that he had lost his wallet. The doctor said that he could keep the money. At that moment, the administrator's hand intervened between them. He snatched the money and said that in that case, he would get the money. Jolan felt ashamed of her father's greed. She exclaimed indignantly that he had no right to do that to other people's money. The man explained that the equipment belonged to him, so he deserved the money. The guy looked at the old man with resentment. Fortunately, an ambulance arrived. He turned to the doctor and introduced himself. He and his sister are from Guangzhou. If he needs anything, he can go to the doctor. Lin Hao shook his interlocutor's hand and gave his name. He was glad to meet the man. It might come in handy later. The young man remembered that time was going too fast and said goodbye. Jolan asked him not to leave. They needed him. The girl hugged the doctor's sleeve and asked her father to get the guy a job. Lin Hao asked confusedly why she wanted him to stay so much. The director roughly grabbed the first aid kit and dragged the stubborn boy behind him, with the nurse nudging him from behind. The young man raised his eyebrows upward in surprise. He couldn't understand what the man and his daughter were up to. Clearing his ear, Wu Jianyao carelessly said that Lin Hao himself wanted to work here, so he decided to hire him. The young man gently reminded him that the director had recently kicked him out of the clinic and ordered him to find a job elsewhere. Jolan couldn't stand it and exclaimed that this place was the best fit. He should stay to work at the clinic. The principal scowled and told her daughter that she should behave with more restraint. The nurse apologized. The young man realized that no one was interested in his opinion. Just like in the morning, the receptionist glumly asked for the young man's full name. Lin Hao introduced himself and asked him to memorize his name. Wu Renyao said he accepts him on the same terms. The boy said he would not go for less than 5,000 yuan a month now. The man exclaimed that he thought too highly of himself just because he saved that girl with multiple wounds. Lin Hao frowned. Lowering the price was not in his plans. He said he agreed for 4,500, but that was the final price. The administrator was trying to buy it as cheaply as possible. He exclaimed that he was willing to pay 3,000. If he didn't like it, the guy could leave. The young man angrily remarked that the old man was very stingy. His salary should be at least 4,000. The man agreed to 3,500. The girl brought their hands together and declared that 3,500 was just the normal rate. The guy admired the girl's smooth skin. The man questioned whether she was his daughter. The nurse angrily replied that the birth certificate was in his desk. The administrator realized that Jolan knew about his CDs. The girl said that he was no longer young. It was bad for his health to watch such things. She wanted to add that it was all available on the internet, but she was frightened. Lin Hao immediately realized what she was talking about. He grinned and repeated the beginning of her sentence. Jolan excitedly said that she didn't mean anything like that. The man shouted so loudly that his hair stood on end. He told his daughter not to go through his things, and reminded the young man that he would not get housing, food, or insurance. The boy calmly replied that this was too much. If he starved to death, the clinic would have no one to work and treat patients. The girl reminded them that they had enough chopsticks and bowls. The man exclaimed that he would not let them sleep in the same room. The young man said that was a great idea. The administrator turned to him angrily. Lin Hao stated that it would be much better if he was found a separate room. Grudgingly, Wu Zhenyao promised to give him a place in the clinic's warehouse and demanded that he be given a license with a diploma. The young man replied in surprise that he had neither. The director angrily asked if he had at least an ID card with him. The guy replied that he did not have such a document either. The administrator indignantly asked where he had come from without any documents at all. Lin Hao smiled enigmatically as he recalled his native scenery. He had come to this abandoned village after descending from the distant mountains. Wu Renyao angrily suggested that the boy was hiding from the police. Jolan asked her father not to make a scene and offered to help the young man clean the warehouse. The receptionist yelled that the guy might be a terrorist and would get them into big trouble. The nurse quietly replied that it was all nonsense. He'd better go home and make something to eat. The man exclaimed that he had never cooked. The girl leaned over to him and quietly said that you could look up information about this guy on the internet. The young man noticed that the two were acting very suspicious, as if they really suspected him of something bad. Meanwhile, Wu Renyao announced that he was going home. Lin Hao was overjoyed. Jolan had purposely sent him away to be alone with the doctor. The girl angrily asked why the boy was stuck on the doorstep. The young man shyly suggested that they start by getting to know each other better. Jolan wondered in surprise what this had to do with anything. Lin Hao could barely contain himself anymore and suggested closing the door. The nurse grabbed his arm roughly and dragged him behind her. She said indignantly that it was taking a long time to talk. He noticed that Jolan's whole body was shaking. He imagined her lying in bed and beckoning him to her. Unfortunately, the nurse rudely shattered all his fantasies and asked to see the equipment he needed. Lin Hao was indignant. He had never imagined that he had been called in just for this. Jolan replied in surprise that she had no other reason. The young man asked why she had escorted her father out. He thought it was because of money so that he could pay less. The doctor asked why they didn't have an operating room. The nurse embarrassedly replied that her father only saw patients with headaches and colds. Lin Hao frowned, noting that their clinica provided few services. The girl admitted that it used to be different and suggested that they start cleaning. She set up a stool and climbed to the top shelf of the rack. Unfortunately, her heel slipped. Jolan flew downward with a scream. The young man immediately rushed to her rescue and tried to keep her from falling. He reached out his hand in a leap, intending to support the girl. All these actions caused the embarrassed Jolan to land painfully on her fifth point, and Lin Hao managed to fly his face between her legs. Moreover, the young man jabbed his nose into the girl's underwear. It was so unexpected that he himself blushed a lot. Of course, the nurse couldn't stand that and immediately punched him in the nose with her fist. The boy shouted that it was a misunderstanding. Jolan frowned and said she would only forgive him for trying to help and asked him to be careful with the equipment so she wouldn't have to pay. The girl pulled her dress lower and said quietly that all the misfortunes in their family had started on one ill-fated day. Lin Hao asked to tell the story already on the way. He was very hungry, so it was time to go to her place for dinner already. Jolan agreed. When the boy and girl arrived in the city, the young man was very surprised. He had no idea that Guangzhou was so big. It later turned out that the posh metropolis and its poor neighborhoods were separated only by a river with a pedestrian bridge. Lin Hao was surprised at such a strong contrast and wondered why the houses on this side of the river were so dilapidated. The girl only sighed heavily. After a while, Jolan quietly said that this was their dwelling. The young man couldn't believe it. This house was more like a barn. It was large and 2 stories high, but with peeling walls. There were deep cracks all over the house. The guy asked in surprise what really happened to the girl's family. She sat down on the steps and roared. Jolan admitted that her father used to be different. Lin Hao thoughtfully suggested that the old man had been more stingy before. The girl indignantly refuted his suspicions. She exclaimed resentfully that her father in the old days had always been happy to help other people. The young man at first thought he had misunderstood her and clarified if she was really talking about the man who had hired him. Jolin recounted that the story of their downfall began when a friend of his father's sold him human serum albumin. That day, Uncle Guai bragged to the man that he had gotten a new shipment of albumin at a special price. Her father asked if the supplier was reliable. Lin Hao interrupted the girl and remarked that good medicines couldn't be cheap. His companion bitterly replied that it was easy for him to judge from the outside. The young man stared lustfully at the neckline in the girl's dress and stated authoritatively that he was very knowledgeable in some areas. Jolan blushed like a boiled cancer and angrily asked if he was listening to her at all. The guy hastily replied that he was all ears. The girl sadly continued her narrative. A batch of medicines had been purchased. Unfortunately, the medicine caused an allergic reaction in one elderly couple. At the time, her father was an attending physician and her mother administered injections. Her parents were very concerned about the health of their patients, and their careers were hanging in the balance. An elderly old man was dying in their arms. Wu Renyao begged him to hold on just a little longer, and the ambulance was on its way. It was the first such case in 10 years. Gui immediately disappeared and left his parents to pay for the problematic medicine. The family of the deceased had to pay nearly 1 million yen. To do so, the Wu family had to sell all their property. The girl couldn't stand it and burst into tears. She admitted that even now they still owed $200,000. Lin Hao pulled her to him. Jolan tearfully told her that her mother had died due to overwork, and her father had become irritable and started to go bald. Suddenly the girl realized that her companion had hugged her, and she blushed. She angrily demanded to be released. The young man explained that Jolin had pressed herself against him. She didn't want to listen to any explanations. As soon as Lin Hao let go of the girl, she kicked him in the chin, demonstrating a stretch. At this time, an old man came in and glumly informed them that they had better go to the kitchen and finally prepare the food. Lin Hao continued to lie there unconscious. The man demanded that he get up immediately or he would be left without food. When he heard about the food, the guy immediately came to his senses. He devoured the food the girl had prepared with gusto. Jolan said he could add more if he needed it. The master was not happy that the boy was eating so much. Lin Hao thanked the girl. The beef and celery are delicious, but the meat could have been a bit more. The man became furious and shouted that for 100 yuan a month, he can't have a banquet. No one is forcing him to eat so much. The young man humbly asked meekly to apologize for his silly remark. Of course, this food is simply wonderful and deserves praise. Wu Zhenyao was surprised that their guest didn't argue with him this time. He remembered well how the guy had desperately bargained for his wages. Lin Hao ate so much that his stomach immediately increased in volume. After putting down a pile of empty plates, the guy asked where their shower room was. The man immediately estimated that it would be very difficult to feed such a glutton. The young man wondered why they were looking at him so strangely. The old man took him to the bathroom and grumpily demanded that he return to the clinic immediately after showering. Barely closing the door behind him, Lin Hao danced with joy. He had finally managed to sneak into the holy place where the girl was bathing. The guy quickly undressed and armed himself with a towel. It was time to search for the beauty's personal belongings. As he plunged into the bathtub, the young man shamefully imagined that in the same bath the embarrassed Jolan was wiping her face with the same towel. Suddenly, Lin Hao noticed a strange oblong object. He realized that the girl knew how to have fun. On close inspection, it turned out that the beauty's hair was still on this strange object. The young man immediately blushed. In addition, there were 2 buttons on the device. Pressing one of them made the object vibrate. The boy's heart beat harder. He sniffed at the divine artifact. Suddenly, the man shouted that he would deduct the cost of the leg razor from his paycheck if the kid broke it. Lin Hao couldn't believe that it was just a foot razor. Worst of all, it belonged to Wu Renyao himself and not the girl. Making himself comfortable, the young man remembered that he was going to organize his own business, but instead he got a job at the clinic. While Lin Hao was pondering about the razor incident, Jolan walked into the room with a bag of food and said that it was time for breakfast. The boy glanced furtively at the nurse. The doctor found her so charming that he couldn't bear to say it out loud. Lin Hao embarrassedly exclaimed to the girl that he wanted to hug her and held out his arms to her. She blushed in embarrassment and lowered her eyes down. Not even a few seconds later, the angry Jolan straightened her arm and slapped him on the chin, causing him to lose his balance. The girl yelled that today was his first day on the job. He needed to behave appropriately. She opened the box of food. The aroma wafted across the room. The guy was so hungry that he just swallowed the food. Wu Renyao slowly chewed his food without paying attention to him. Suddenly, Lin Hao saw that the man had a steamed cake in his hands. He exclaimed that he wanted a baoji too. The old man immediately stuffed the rest of the pie in his mouth and turned away. He declared that he would not give the boy anything. The young man immediately took the entire plate of pies from the director. The man indignantly demanded to give them back. Jolan barely restrained herself from smiling. They were both acting like children. Suddenly, someone outside the door called out to Wu Zhenyao. The father and daughter anxiously looked at each other. The receptionist immediately said that he felt sick after breakfast. He urgently needed to go to the bathroom. The young man looked at the nurse. The girl also quickly found herself and said that they needed to prepare the medical equipment. The door opened. A burly man with short yellow hair stood on the threshold and asked where Wu Renyao was. Lin Hao surprisingly replied that the man felt very sick, so he left to go to the restroom. Something about the visitor confused the guy. After a few seconds, the guy realized there was an eerie smell coming from a customer wearing a lilac t-shirt with sunflowers embroidered on it. The young man suggested that the guest first deal with himself. He listed to the indignant man all his symptoms of diseases. After listening to all the symptoms, which were absolutely true, the visitor asked in amazement how he knew this. Lin Hao proudly replied that he was a doctor, so he could easily determine a patient's condition by their appearance. The man did not believe that this was possible without tests. He incredulously asked the young man to tell him what was happening to him. The guy told me that the client had a common kidney problem. The man exclaimed that he actually had a prostate problem. Lin Hao complimented the diagnosis. He said that the visitor would get an erection, but it usually didn't last long. Jolan carefully looked out and saw that the men were talking about something. She didn't understand why Lin Hao wouldn't just escort the customer out. The man asked if it could be cured. The young man smiled and said that money was the only issue. The visitor raised an eyebrow in surprise. He realized it would cost a lot and asked angrily how much it would cost. The guy said he wouldn't charge too much. A complete cure would only cost the man 100,000 yuan. Wu Renyao carefully peeked through the slit of the door. He couldn't figure out what his coworker was up to. The thug shouted that the guy was too young and had no skills. Lin Hao sighed and offered to demonstrate in practice. The man bowed and asked how the doctor planned to do this. The young man asked to put his hands up. The visitor irritatedly asked what it all meant. Lin Hao promised that he would be responsible for the treatment if things didn't work out. The client grudgingly threw his hands up in the air and muttered that he would see what such young doctors were good for. The odor from his armpits was so pungent that the young man couldn't breathe and stuck absorbent cotton in his nose. Moreover, even Jolan smelled the unpleasant stench. The man glanced unhappily at the boy who was trying to get closer through the dense veil of foul odor. Meanwhile, Lin Hao quickly took out an acupuncture needle and clasped it tightly in his left hand. He performed exactly the same operation with the second needle and squeezed it with the thumb and forefinger of his right hand. The young man stuck both needles into the big man's armpits at the same time. The man could barely stand, his face twisted in pain. The client irritably lifted the doctor by his collar and said that he was fed up with his life. Lin Hao promised that he wouldn't be bothered by the odor anymore. The man raised his eyebrows in surprise and asked for clarification as to exactly what odor the doctor was referring to. The young man sneezed loudly. The cotton swabs flew out of his nostrils. He declared that now the visitor's armpits no longer smelled. The big man turned his elbow incredulously and sniffed. In his opinion, nothing had changed at all. The kid had lied. Lin Hao explained that he wouldn't understand anything this way. He asked the patient to first take off his shirt and wash himself. Wu Zhenyao was very displeased that the guy asked the man to go exactly where he was hiding. The amble diligently washed himself up to his waist. Lin Hao said in surprise that the old man should be here. At this time, the headmaster cursed at the young man hiding behind the door. The thug shouted happily that the smell was gone. The guy only had to look at the man to vomit. The client was very happy with the operation and admired the doctor. Jolan had been peeking all this time and now thought that the young man had a magic needle. As soon as the bulky guy left, the girl confusedly asked if the guy had actually managed to pay off 100,000 of their debt. Lin Hao stated that he would have been able to request much more if he had known that it was a creditor who was owed 200,000. Wu Zhenyao incredulously asked how he managed to get that guy to agree to such an amount. Jolan was almost jumping for joy. The young man turned to the director and explained that their dialogue had started with something that all people were concerned about. The conversation was about the patient's health. After the odor problem was solved, the bulky man believed it, but asked for a price reduction. The doctor said that as the price goes down, the quality of treatment will also go down. The man knew that surgery was usually needed to remove the bad odor, and the guy did it quickly. He asked how to cure everything else. Lin Hao showed the patient 3 fingers and assumed that his lovemaking lasted no more than 3 minutes. The man was amazed. The doctor had hit the mark again. He asked angrily how the young man had managed to find out. That's exactly what he had yesterday. The guy thought about it and said it was better to eat a proper diet and try to keep his sanity. The big guy asked what could be done. Lin Hao felt like a rescue angel at that moment and began to quickly dictate the ingredients that would help the patient. The doctor said that medical supplements should not be abused. Like the stock market, there are ups and downs. The man was amazed. He was really speculating on stocks. The young man smiled and added that his treatment is unique. There is nowhere like it. In 3 days, you have to bring 100,000 yuan. The man cheerfully said that he would come for all the drugs in 3 days, but he was not going to pay for the treatment. Lin Hao was not prepared for this turn of events. He wiggled his eyebrows in surprise and asked what was wrong. The patient waved his shirt carelessly and explained that even with the treatment, Wu Zhenyao would still owe him over 100,000. To clarify, the man introduced himself. His name is Feng Tong, and Wu Renyao owes him a decent amount of money. Lin Hao became angry. Because the guy turned out to be the boss's creditor, he had only wasted his time and wouldn't earn anything. The young man grimaced and said that he would have taken the whole 200,000 if he had known about it beforehand. Jolan said cheerfully that he had helped a lot as it was. The man turned around and walked off in the other direction. The girl asked in surprise where he was going. Zhenyao proudly said that he was going for food, and there would be meat for dinner. The nurse couldn't bear it from the excess of feelings and threw herself into Lin Hao's arms, never failing to thank him sincerely. Lin Hao enjoyed Jolan's tight embrace. He assured her not to worry, saying that it was all small things. She felt something solid in her embrace with him and asked why he was horny again. Hao didn't answer that question and said he wanted to cuddle. Jolan angrily pushed him away from her, calling him shameless. She asked, "Where's the needle he used to cure his armpit odor?" Lin, in response, smiled slyly and said that he couldn't tell her that since everyone had their own secrets. Jolan asked how he knew the lender was involved in stock trading. Hao said he would answer if she gave him a kiss. The girl was angry at this behavior. She called him a little rascal. Lin said he was a grown man. He began to tell me that when he and the lender were talking about kidney treatment, the lender kept his eyes on the stock report in the newspaper, so it was easy to understand. Jolan looked at the guy with admiration, for he not only had excellent medical skills, but also great observation. Their discussion was interrupted by Zhenyao telling them to go to the mountains with him. He said they were going there to gather medicinal herbs. The boy was surprised at such words. The old man asked why he was staring at him. He said there was no money for herbs. The Trinity set out to collect medicinal herbs. They traveled a long way. The scenery was mesmerizingly beautiful. Lin Hao walked along the path and thought about the old man traveling such a long way for the sake of saving some money. He was speechless. Jolan told Hao that there was one thing that still bothered her. She asked, where did he come from after all? He replied that curiosity had killed the cat. Sis said she wasn't a cat, so she asked him to tell her where he learned such a skill. Lin began to tell me that he came from the mountains overseas. His life didn't change much with the move, but he still takes care of patients the same way. Suddenly, Lin Hao spotted a plant called false ginseng. He was surprised that there were so many herbs growing on this mountain. Lin, in an instant, felt something soft pressing against his back. He was shocked, but it felt really good. Jolan gently hugged Hao, pressing her breasts against him. She carefully watched the plants he was collecting. She was stunned and asked why he was frozen. Lin felt the warmth of her body and was ecstatic. He was receiving indescribable pleasure. Jolan became indignant at this disgusting behavior. Her ears felt like they were steaming with rage. She kicked Lin Hao's groin with all her might as she was unwilling to tolerate being treated like this anymore. The guy was thrown into shock as he had not expected such a blow from the girl at all. He fell face first into the leaves. He shook himself off and asked his sister not to freak out like that. Jolan asked him to be quiet, and he asked her to take her time and be careful. The girl continued to walk forward without waiting for Hao. She told him that she had no desire to communicate with him. She accidentally stepped on a snake. As soon as the girl realized what she had stepped on, she began to understand what was happening. Her eyes filled with fear and horror at what she saw, and it was as if she had goosebumps on her skin. Jolan started screaming at the top of her voice and begged Lin Hao for help. He didn't understand what had happened. The guy calmly put his arm around the girl and told her that she had no reason to worry. He said he would protect her. The girl jumped into his arms as she was very scared. Hao was aroused by this and said that she was perfectly safe with him. Jolan whispered in his ear that the snake was just a turtle's claw. The boy's cheeks flushed red with pleasure. The girl angrily told him to let her go while calling her a pervert. Lin Hao was embarrassed. He emphasized that she had jumped on it herself. Jolan asked him to shut up and help the turtle. Lin Hao didn't think for long and grabbed the first stick he could find and gave a sharp blow to the snake's head. The turtle turned green as it was poisoned by the poison. Lin said that turtles with golden shells are rare. Jolan took the stunned snake in her hands. She suggested that the boy take it with him, because it could be used in medicine. Jolin asked enthusiastically, since Lin Hao is such a master at curing people, could he also save the turtle? Lin didn't doubt himself for a moment, and said that he could do it without any problem. The girl said that it was time for them to go back as it was getting late. The sun was already setting. There was a beautiful sunset. The weather was warm. Trinity had already returned to the clinic. Zhen Yao was approached by an acquaintance who came to ask for some herbs for rheumatism. The man looked into the basket and saw a turtle with a golden shell in it. He was surprised, as it was rarely seen. He determined it was a male. He said it was very rare to find such a turtle, and a male too. Zhen Yao asked the man how much such a turtle was worth. The chief said that if it wasn't poisoned, it would be at least 200,000 yuan. Zhen Yao was very surprised by this price. He decided that he should sell the turtle. Jolan didn't like this. She ran to help the turtle and elbowed Lin Hao. She ran as hard as she could, screaming for her father not to dare sell the turtle. The father asked his daughter to calm down. Zhen Yao shouted for Lin Hao to stop the girl from doing something stupid and interfering with the deal. Hao accepted the boss's order, saying that he would gladly do his errand. He smiled at the boss. With a smile on his face, he gently and unexpectedly grabbed Jolan's waist, saying that she had no reason to worry. The girl sadly asked not to sell the turtle. After all, they had only saved her. Hao asked her to think about her family's situation and not to get emotional. Zhen Yao was enthusiastic. He said that this was the first time Lin Hao was saying something sensible. He was pleasantly surprised. The chief interrupted their discussion by shouting out that the turtle was not worth 200,000 yuan because it was poisoned. Zhen Yao grabbed him and told him not to even try to cheat him. He was angry because he was afraid that the turtle would not be sold. The man said she could be saved with a serum, but if she wasn't healed, she would remain ill. The chief asked in a calm tone of voice, "Aren't they doctors?" He added that all they had to do was remove the poison from the turtle's system. Jolan was excited and asked if they could really help the turtle. Lin Hao took advantage of the moment and smoothly moved his hand to her chest. He said that Jolan could leave the matter to him, as he would be able to save the turtle. The girl at that moment felt his hand on her breast. The girl was angry. She immediately hit the guy in the face with her fist. She called him a rascal. Zhen Yao asked if Hao would definitely be up to the task. Lin replied that it is the easiest thing to do, but the clinic does not have the right equipment and funds for the surgery. Jolan asked Lin Hao to write a list of what he needed, and she would go to Guangzhou and buy what he needed. He asked her to kiss him so he could get up. The girl grabbed his head with both hands. She started yelling at him to stop fooling around and just write the damn list. Lin Hao was frightened by the girl's nerves and immediately started writing the letter. He was rapidly writing a list. He finished writing the list and handed it to the girl. Zhen Yao, seeing the volume of this list, was stunned. His eyes bulged. Lin began to reassure him and asked him to think hard. He said that although he would have to spend a little, he would be rewarded with 200,000 yuan. Zhen Yao said he would go get the medicine and told the guy and girl to take care of the turtle. Lin Hao held the list to Jolan's face, telling her to prepare these medicines on a slow fire. She looked at him with surprise and a share of fright, and asked if they wouldn't wait for their father and start doing everything themselves. Lin Hao confidently stated that he was afraid that the turtle might not live at all before Zhen Yao returned. The girl asked why then he had sent his father to get all this stuff. He replied that if it weren't for these circumstances, Zhen Yao would never have bought the missing medicine for the clinic. The chief suddenly said that if Lin Hao managed to cure this turtle, he would be willing to trade it for a car. The car stood outside the window. Jolan asked, "Is the man really willing to trade the car for a skull?" After all, it had been purchased by his son for 500,000 yuan. Lin Hao had an incentive to cure the turtle. He realized that this turtle was really special. The man said he already had several females and needed one male. He added that if they cured him, he would not even bargain. Lin Hao said that in that case there was nothing to lose a minute. Jolan thought admiringly that he looked very reliable when serious. She gets nervous since she can't find the turtle's veins. Hao tells her to look at the list. All it says are Chinese remedies that will draw out the poison. Jolan looked at Lin Hao in surprise and was surprised. He said that they could even use the herbs they had gathered today. Lin Hao began to mix the medicinal plants in a bowl to prepare them for use. He also put the turtle in the bowl and put the bowl on the fire. Jolan was surprised. She asked if he was going to cook her. Hao told her not to worry. He said he was controlling the temperature. He asked Jolan to open the turtle's mouth and pour the medicine into it, then put a moistened towel under it. The chief watched all this and was amazed at the method of removing the poison. He asked Jolan if this guy was definitely a doctor and not an intern. She said, "Can't he see for himself?" Suddenly, Zhen Yao came home. He said he knew that the bastard had lied to him about the medicine. He told Jolan that he had already looked at the list at the pharmacy, but there were only the usual antibiotics. He said he almost had a heart attack. The chief said that he was fine now. He also said that since Zhen Yao had come, there was something he wanted to ask him. He asked him with great surprise where he had dug up this doctor. Zhen Yao said he couldn't tell him that. The chief asked, how would he rate the young lad's skills compared to his own? His mouth was wide open. Zhen Yao thought for a moment, and confidently said that he had to admit that the young doctor was superior to himself. The man approached Lin Hao and began to ask him where he had studied medicine. Hao told him not to beat around the bush. If something was bothering him, he would take a look. The chief told him to ignore it because it was a foregone conclusion. He told him to just sell him the turtle. He looked very sad. Lin Hao confidently said that under no circumstances would he sell him the turtle. It was as if he was plotting something. The chief looked at Zhen Yao. He said that Hao had saved the turtle, so it was up to him. The guy said he wouldn't give the turtle back until the chief told him about his illness. The man said sadly that if he could cure him, he wouldn't spare $1 million. It was as if he was building up his courage before he told the story. There was a sudden pause in the conversation. Lin was wary, for the pause was not good. He wondered, perhaps it was cancer? Lin Hao thought to himself that silence spoke for itself. Apparently he had hit the mark. He asked the chief to show his x-ray. He showed the x-ray. The man said that he had been to the hospital many times already. He had no hope left, so even Lin couldn't cure him. Lin asked the chief, if he could cure him of this disease, would he agree to give him his 8 females instead of $1 million? He happily looked at the x-ray. Zhoulan asked Lin Hao not to joke like that. After all, he couldn't cure cancer. She was excited. He coldly said that she still didn't seem to believe in him. He offered her a bet that he could cure the cancer. She asked how on earth could they argue. Hao said that if he couldn't cure the cancer, he would work for nothing. But if he did succeed in curing him, Zhoulan would have to kiss him. He dreamed of kissing her. Zhen Yao made up her mind for her, saying that it was the right arrangement for them. Zhoulan was surprised and couldn't say anything. She angrily asked her father what he was even doing. He answered his daughter that it was only a small sacrifice to save the chief. Hao asked Zhen Yao to fetch a gourd from the backyard. He told him to stop thinking about food and take care of the village head, but Lin said he needed pumpkin seeds to cure this disease, so less words, more deeds. He also asked Zhoulan to bring him fresh fruit of Azadirach, to be done as soon as possible. The young doctor immediately began to prepare these potions on the fire. The young physician immediately began to prepare these potions on the fire. He prepared 2 plates with some obscure contents. It looked more like waste products. The father and daughter looked at this with amazement and asked if he was going to beat cancer with this. The chief asked, is that how Lin claims that if he eats it, he will recover? He asked, isn't the Melia Azadirach poisonous? Lin Hao confidently told him not to worry as he would not die from such a dose. He said that it would be better if he drank it in a volley. The head of the village immediately began to drink the medicine. He decided to try it first, and then he drank it in one gulp. It was very bitter, and his eyes turned red. Trinity stood to the side and watched everything happen in panic. Zhen Yao asked, what happened to him? Zhoulan asked Lin Hao to save the chief. The village chief asked for a bowl. He said he needed it. Lin immediately set the bowl down and the chief threw up. The man decided to look at the results of the vomit. He was horrified to see what was in the dish. There were incomprehensible parasites in it. Lin said the blackouts in his liver were not caused by a tumor but by parasites. He told Zhoulan that she owed him a kiss and asked if she would pay now or later. She asked if that was all Hao was thinking about, and she also asked if he had really managed to cure the village head's illness. He said that he had. Zhoulan said that there would be no kiss until he followed through. She tapped him on the head. The surprised village head opened his eyes wide and opened his mouth. He asked if Lin was sure it wasn't cancer. He held up the x-ray and asked, how about this? Lin Hao, with a smile on his face, looked at him and was confident. He said the secret is just in the x-ray. Most doctors would look at it and say it's cancer. Hao also said that if the chief took another x-ray, he would see that the blackout had changed its position. He said that the presence of parasites was given away by the corners of the eyes. The chief took his hand and asked in amazement, is his illness gone? Lin said that he would live for another 20 years or more. He asked the chief, since he had cured him, what about these 8 turtles? The chief replied that he had saved his life, so they belonged to him now. Evening came and it became dark all around. The sun had long since set, but the rays of the sun in Lin Hao's soul were just rising. Lin sat with Zhoulan on the chair and watched with delight at the very marvelous picture. Zhoulan's astonishment had no limit. The turtles, which had been given to the young doctor by the head of the village, were mating in front of their owner. Jianyao rejoiced and said that they were not turtles but a gold mine. He said that in the future they would have turtles and they would be rich. He asked Lin Hao and Joy what he would like to eat for dinner. He replied that it was a big crab. The old man started picking his nose and said the guy's lip was not stupid, but agreed to his whims. He suggested that the chief stay with them and have dinner together. The chief thanked for the invitation but declined, saying it was very difficult for him to part with the turtles. As he left, he asked Jianyao to come to him to discuss something. The old man did not refuse to do so. The village head said that his daughter was still unmarried. He asked what the old man thought of Lin Hao. He replied that his Zhoulan also still doesn't have a date yet. Zhoulan and Lin were left alone. She said she was very curious about what the men were talking about now. It seemed mysterious to her. Lin Hao coquettishly suggested that perhaps they were discussing their wedding. His eyes seemed to be filled with love. Zhoulan told him that she was the only one who could cook the crab, and if he wanted to eat it, the kissing arrangement was off. This alarmed Lin Hao, and he decided to take the initiative because at this rate, he would never get a kiss. He kissed Zhoulan's cheek. The girl got angry and started yelling that he was a fool. He started to run away from her, saying with a smile that he had just decided to act first. The weather outside was beautiful. The sky was clear and clear. The sun was warming the streets with its rays. Lin Hao was at the reception desk in the clinic and complained of boredom because the attendance was very low. In front of the entrance to the clinic stood a young man of large build. He had obviously not come here to receive medical care. Lin greeted him and asked, and in a calm tone asked if something was bothering him. The young guy was very panting and nervous. He asked if Zhoulan was in the clinic at the moment. Hao replied that she had not arrived yet, so the man could contact him with any questions. The guy asked him for syringes, saying his pig needed a vaccination. He needed 8 syringes. Lin Hao didn't delay the man. He gave him the requested 8 syringes in his hands without any questions. The man immediately grabbed a pack of syringes and started running towards the exit. Lin shouted that he hadn't paid. The guy stopped and apologized, saying he had completely forgotten. He asked how much he owed for them. Sweat was dripping off him. Lin Hao said that he owed 32 yuan. The man put the money on the table and started to run away. Hao shouted that he didn't take the change. Zhoulan appeared at the clinic. After greeting Lin Hao, she asked why Liang Dan needed syringes. She looked adorable. Hao couldn't stop fantasizing. A wary Liang Dan walked back to the clinic. Zhoulan asked him why he had come back. He said the needles were too big and asked me to give him 1 milliliter each. He was sweating from nerves. The girl asked warily how he was going to inoculate the pigs with such small needles. She also asked if he had injected them last month. The guy started nervously yelling for her to stop this interrogation and give him needles and saline. His eyes were red with nerves. Lin Hao's gaze at this moment was serious and wary. He began to guess something. He at the same moment rolled up Liang Dan's sleeves to make sure of his guesses. He suspected the guy. There were injection marks on the guy's arm. 2 needle holes were clearly visible. Lin asked him, "What is it?" The guy, realizing that his intentions had been discovered, ran away. He shouted that he didn't want anything else. The angry and surprised Zhoulan said that he must have been sent here by the 8 demons. Lin didn't understand her. He suggested that perhaps this was a company that was addicted to drugs. His face was wary. The girl warily replied that these 8 rascals were terrorizing the village, but worst of all, they were encouraging the young ones to use drugs. Suddenly, unknown men entered the clinic. One of them had tattoos on his lower back and arms. He asked why she was being so rude about them. He said all they wanted was 8 syringes. They were 3 young guys, their hair colors were bright. They were dressed casually. Lin Hao and Zhoulan interrupted the conversation and turned their attention to the drug addicts. They were wary of their appearance. The red-haired demon said that cousin Zhoulan was looking more and more beautiful every time. All 8 demons stood next to each other. The girl was angry at everything that was happening. She started yelling, "What is his cousin doing here?" The blue-haired demon told the companion that he had fallen in love with his cousin. Zhoulan threatened, saying that they had better leave while she was still in control. She shouted that they were not welcome here. The blue-haired junkie said he liked girls like her. He asked her to come over and hug him. The junkie didn't even realize he was imagining a girl. He walked over to Lin. He was standing with a serious look at that moment. Lin looked at him puzzled and said that he had very strange tastes. The junkie already wanted to kiss him. He realized in an instant that it wasn't a girl standing in front of him. He immediately began to ask, "Where did Hao come from?" Lin stated that he will not sell syringes to anyone, and if they are not happy about something, he is at their service. He asked why intimidate the girl. Dune asked if the guy thought he was a hero. He said that if he couldn't wait to die, they were willing to help him. Lin Hao confidently said that enough of this idle chatter, and suggested that he go outside to sort things out. Jolin, seeing everything that was happening, began to panic. She shouted for Lin to stop and not to go anywhere with the drug addicts. The guy told her not to worry as they were incapable of doing anything to him. He was sure he would defeat them all. The drug addicts surrounded the guy. Lin said they had two choices. Either he would beat them all or he would beat each of them. One of the drug addicts said he was too arrogant. Dong gave a command to the others, telling them to beat Lin Hao to death. The hyenas immediately swooped down on the guy. They pounced on Lin. Dong stood back and tauntingly shouted that he would beat the hell out of him. Hao tried to reach out to hit him, but in an instant, Lin Hao realized that there was a way in which he would defeat this entire gang of knuckleheads. He began to press a certain area of the body hard and briskly. The addicts immediately lost all their strength and could not move. He overpowered everyone and coldly told Dune that he was the only one left, so he could choose how he beat him. The others yelled out how much it hurt. The red-haired junkie stood puzzled. He couldn't understand. Was it really magic? He ordered his boys to stand up. Jolan watched from the side. She was delighted, saying that it looked like acupuncture points like in martial arts novels. Lin Hao told Dong that they, the little brats, weren't even enough to warm up, so they'd better run home to their mommies. Dune was enraged. While Lin's back was turned to him, he pulled out a sharp knife from his pocket. He swung it sharply at Hao. Jolan saw all of this. She panicked and started shouting for Lin Hao to turn around and save herself the blow. He realized that behind his back stood a junkie with a knife. His gaze was serious, filled with anger. He silently turned around and delivered a sharp, straight punch right to his opponent's jaw. The knife flew out of Dune's hands and he flew to the floor. Such an act from a guy like this mesmerized Jolin's heart. She admired him, saying that he was amazing, and she couldn't even think that such a thing could happen. Lin Hao coldly ordered Dong to take off his belt and give it to him. The junkie said he wouldn't do that, but as soon as Hao shifted his gaze to him, he immediately handed over the belt. He kneeled down and kindly gave the belt to Lin. The other junkies told their boss that he was embarrassing himself in this way. He got angry at them and ordered them to shut up. He said that if they were so clever, they should go and beat Lin. Lin Hao, meanwhile, decided not to waste precious time and swung his belt with all his might. The addict was thrown aside by the impact. Lin asked if anyone else wanted to try out the belt on themselves. The demons kneeled down and were afraid to open their mouths. Jolan asked why he was keeping these cretins here. Why not just chase them away? The junkies agreed with her, begging to be let go. Lin Hao immediately punched one of the drug addicts. He asked Jolan to call the village head as he had an idea on how to make money for the clinic. The girl enthusiastically inquired if he really wanted to cure them of their drug addiction. He said she was thinking right. She started yelling, calling him an idiot. She asked why he didn't consult her. He told her to calm down because he knew what he was doing. Suddenly, Ren Yao appeared. He shouted at Lin Hao with all his might, calling him a fool. He asked him what he was doing. He asked if he knew who these people even were. Lin Hao said that they seemed to be from the legendary Dead Love clan. The addicts gathered in one pile and, with a smile on their faces, said they were from a clan of chrysanthemum lovers. Lin Hao and Jolan vomited from the nonsense they were not carrying. They asked them to shut up because it was impossible to listen to. Lin angrily swung his belt, asking who allowed them to get up. He said it was disgusting. Duong begged to be forgiven for it. Lin Hao threatened them, telling them that they had better not make a move until the village head came. Dong said to himself that this guy didn't know yet that the village head was his uncle. The village head at the door asked Hao what had happened that even he had to be summoned. He told him to take a look at everything himself. Yan Dong saw his uncle and looked at him upset. The chief asked who had beaten him up like that. Yan rushed to his uncle and hugged his legs. Tears streamed from his eyes as he complained that he had been terribly maimed. The drug addict started pointing his finger at Lin Hao. He shouted that he was the only one responsible for beating him. The village head all of a sudden delivered a kick to his nephew. Yan Dong, not expecting such a blow, fell from his knees to the floor. The chief started yelling that he wished Dune hadn't been beaten to death. He was angry at his drug-addicted nephew. Yan lay on the floor in tears and cried out, saying how could his uncle do such a thing since he was his nephew. He replied that if he had not been his nephew, he would have died 800 times over. Jolan shyly walked up to the chief and interrupted him. She decided to confess to him what Yan was really about, but the village head interrupted her, saying that nothing needed to be said, as he could imagine for himself what they were doing here. The chief walked over to Lin Hao and nervously said that he unfortunately had to ask for his help. Lin told the village head that he understood everything he wanted to say, but first we need to get their parents here. They called the parents of a crowd of young addicts. They all gathered at the entrance to the clinic and waited for their children's rehabilitation to begin. One of the men told the chief that he knew the treatment wasn't working, didn't he? He asked how that doctor was going to do it. The chief said that he had cured even his hopeless disease. People were surprised. How could this be in a clinic without any equipment? One of the men said he didn't believe it. The head of the village started shouting for them all to shut up. He shouted that because of their carelessness they had grown up like this. He began to say that, as everyone knows, because of his illness, he gave up a prosperous life to become the head of the village in such a small village. He stated that Lin Hao was the one who had saved him from despair, for he had lost all hope and was living while waiting for death. He started yelling that the parents never cared about these kids, and even now they don't want to show any responsibility. He stated that he would take care of all the expenses. The parents began to say that since the chief was paying for everything, it was all right. One of the men said that in that case, he would agree to follow the advice of the head of the village clinic. Lin Hao asked the chief if he was sure he wanted to pay for everything. Treating 8 fools is not cheap. It will cost about 1,000,000 yuan. The village head of the clinic said it's not a problem. If 8 lives can be saved with that 1,000,000, it's worth it. Zhen Yao stood in a complete stupor. He was stunned and couldn't find the right words to express his emotions. Greed was destroying his mind. Lin Hao coldly said that aside from this, there was one more thing that needed to be clarified. He vehemently declared that since everyone had agreed, no one else should interfere. And it didn't matter what he did, like hitting or humiliating them. The 8 dummies, after hearing this, panicked. They realized that there was no telling what the doctor would do to them. After all that was said, Lin asked to sign the agreement. He said it was obligatory as he didn't want any trouble in case of anything. All the parents signed the document. Lin Hao said that they could now be free. The parents were very frightened. One of the men said that if the doctor did not succeed, he would not blame him. A woman supported the man's words. Dr. Lin asked the chief why he was still here since everyone had already left the premises. The village chief replied that he and Zhen Yao would play chess for now. The doctor prepared some medicinal herbs. He gave the clumps made from the potions to Yandong's patient. The latter didn't understand what it was. Lin Hao said that they had 2 options. Either they would eat this medicine on their own, or he would beat them to a pulp and shove it in. The bestiality agreed unreservedly to drink the medicine, saying that if the bro says so, they'll take it, of course. They put the medicine in their mouths and swallowed it. The doctor told them not to even try to trick him by hiding the medicine under their tongue. Hao sat down on the chair and said whoever finished taking the medicine could leave. He reminded them that they should come again tomorrow at 3 o'clock. The addicts looked at him with great surprise and asked if they could really leave. He shouted that they could go and told them to remember to report at 3 o'clock tomorrow without tardiness. The bestial men obeyed him. Jolin entered the office and asked where the demons had disappeared to. Lin said he had let them go. She asked if he was sure they would return. Dr. Lin Hao said in a confident voice that they would certainly not come back here. The addicts asked their boss, "Are they really coming back here tomorrow?" He said that of course not. If anyone needed to go, let them go alone. Jolan asked in surprise, in that case, why did he let them go? Hao replied that it was to demonstrate what would happen if they did not return. The doctor asked Zhen Yao to go with him to Guangzhou as he wants to buy some equipment but doesn't know where. The old man got angry at this. He said that the current equipment was enough, and besides, they didn't have any money. Lin pointed to the money bags from the chapter, which contained a total of 500,000 yuan, saying what could be taken from there. The old man was dumbfounded. He looked at the bag of money. They glittered brightly in his eyes. He wondered how he could have failed to notice this treasure. The chief said he was sending someone to pick them up, and there will be the other half of the money when it's completed. Instead of eyeballs, it was as if old man Zhen Yao had dollars appearing. He said that in that case, he was going to Guangzhou. Dr. Lin Hao said that he would go this time, because if the old man went, he would buy low-grade equipment. The old man was angry at these words. The chief stopped him, saying that the youth should do as he saw fit. Jolan suggested stopping by the house beforehand. Lin Hao was delighted by this and thought, is she hinting at a date? Jolan complained about the heat and said it was a good time to go shopping. Suddenly she stumbled. Stumbling, she rapidly began to fall forward. She tried with all her might to stop. Lin Hao shouted for her to be more careful, for it was possible to get injured this way. The girl couldn't stop and lightly flew into the guy. He tried to stop her and grabbed her lush breasts. She didn't realize it right away. The girl found herself in an awkward situation. The embarrassed Jolan asked Lin Hao to let her go. Lin abruptly let go of her breasts and began to apologize. The girl at this moment abruptly fell to the floor. Jolan screamed as she hit herself. Her head was right at the guy's feet. Hao didn't realize what was happening. He kept apologizing, making excuses that it was all accidental. She asked for help getting up. Hao praised the chairman's car. Jolan asked Hao to give her his ID card so that she could register him for Social Security. He replied that he didn't have one. She asked sarcastically, maybe he was a second child and they decided not to register him to avoid paying the fine. Lin laughed. Jolan asked why he didn't have an ID card. A guy and a girl drove by a gas station. He asked her to promise not to tell anyone. He said it all started with his kidnapping for sale. The girl interjected, was it really human trafficking? Lin replied that yes, he had been resold many times. He said he ended up being transported on a ship with other children like him. He went on to say that he had lost track of time. It was a living hell. Those who got sick, they didn't treat them. They just threw them into the sea. But he kept telling himself that he had to survive at all costs. Yolan took his hand. She listened to him carefully and asked what happened after he promised himself to survive. He replied that after they were transferred to the old castle, and he realized that his nightmare had just begun. They had to endure experiments every day that decided their fate. Their training was to kill each other. Originally, there were 100 children, but only 10 managed to survive in this absolute hell. Lin Hao continued to narrate. He said that after all this, he was assigned to a concentration camp specializing in human trials. He said it was a collection of madmen obsessed with medical research. They were obsessed with the terrible diseases of this world. Every day, several patients and sometimes even corpses were sent in. Lin said he had a chance to be an assistant. Later, the madmen realized that he could identify a patient's illness, so at 16 he could perform surgeries on his own. Jolan looked at him fearfully and listened intently. She asked, how did he manage to escape? Lin Hao menacingly stated that he had committed suicide to do so. He covered his face with his hand. Jolan was dumbfounded. These words threw her into a stupor, and she couldn't find the right words to express her emotions. Hao said he was exhausted. Sometimes he had to take care of 140 patients a day. The girl's face turned blue with fear. She asked what she meant by suicide. He said it was a fake death. A year later, Lin discovered a drug that could temporarily stop his heart from working, and because of his tight schedule, they thought he died of overwork. Lin Hao said that it was risky, and he really almost died. Jolan asked in surprise, how come? He said he didn't know why, but they had a burial ceremony for him, and if they had decided to cremate him, he was indeed dead. After a while, the effects of the drug wore off, and if they had checked on him longer, they would have realized he was still alive. He said he was lucky he had a scalpel with him to crack open the coffin, and if it hadn't been for him, Hao would have died of suffocation. He told me that he hid on a cargo ship and returned to China 3 months later, and the rest is already known to the girl. Jolan asked in surprise if all this was true. Lin said he had no need to lie to her and said he hoped she would keep it a secret. The girl said he could not worry, and she would not give away the secret even under threat of death. He said he didn't want to put her in danger. Lin stood by the car and said that it was time for them to go, because it was getting late and it would soon get dark. There was an unpleasant situation on the road. Hao tried to overtake another driver, but she shouted that dreaming is not harmful. Lin was annoyed by this behavior of the other driver. He did not understand how he dared to overtake him. After all, he is the king of the road here. Jolan asked him to stop racing, as he doesn't have a driver's license or even an ID card. Lin Hao's eyes seemed to be on fire. He said that he didn't care about any of this. His goal was to overtake the red Porsche. The driver of a red Porsche was suddenly involved in a traffic accident. He collided with another car. Lin Hao was astonished. He looked out of the window and shouted that that guy had just lost his mind. Both cars were wrecked. The door of the perpetrator of the accident was kicked open with a sharp kick. A man began to break out of it. The man had a scratched face. People were shouting that he was drunk out of his mind. The guy could barely stand on his feet, but he managed to walk. He started yelling, "Who here dares to stop him from passing?" He had scratches all over his face. People were outraged because he was not only drunk behind the wheel, but also rude to others. Someone shouted that there was a girl in the car besides him. A charming black-haired girl with lush breasts stuck her leg out of the auto. She was wearing stockings. She asked her man what was wrong. The drunk driver of the red Porsche began beating the black car with his feet, asking how dare the driver prevent him from passing. People were screaming that this idiot kept causing problems. Everyone thought he was disgusting and reckless. Lin told himself that no one knew his identity right now and he shouldn't stand out. But these people could only talk idly. Jolan shouted and asked where he was going. Hao replied that the most important thing now was to save the people, and the rest was not important. He suddenly walked up to the drunk driver and grabbed him by the hair and started yelling at him to get the hell out of here. The driver's companion started yelling at him. She asked how dare he touch him, and did he even know who he was? Lin Hao wasn't afraid and walked up to the girl and slapped her. He shouted for her to get out of here as well. Lin, at one point, noticed that gasoline was leaking from the car. This threatened to cause more problems. He asked the guys to help, but the men didn't want to do that. One of them asked, "What if the car explodes?" They decided to wait for the police. Lin Hao noticed a pregnant woman in a black car. She was unconscious. He immediately began to panic. Jolan was in a stupor. She asked Lin Hao what had happened. Was someone injured? He shouted at her with all his might to stand still and not to dare approach him. Lin started to open the door of the wrecked car. He pulled the door handle as hard as he could, but nothing worked. He didn't give up trying. He kept pulling the doorknob. At one point, he flew away with the door, but it was too late. Suddenly, a nice girl appeared. She said he would save the pregnant woman and she would take care of the rest. We had to hurry. The car could explode at any moment. Hao carefully pulled the woman out of the car. At an inopportune moment, the gasoline began to ignite. Lin Hao lifted the woman into his arms. He began to run away from the furnace with the woman in his arms. He ran as hard as he could, telling himself that he could not die here. Jolan cried out fearfully. She was afraid for Lin Hao's life. The stranger calmly asked, "Did the car explode?" Lin managed to run away and save the pregnant woman. He expended all his strength and fell to his knees. He was tense as he had suffered a very great deal of stress. He could barely keep his emotions in check to keep from screaming. He yelled for the miss to get the first aid kit from the car. The girl immediately rushed to the car. Lin was examining the woman. He said that fortunately the waters had not broken. The drunk driver stood behind him with a bat. He was preparing to hit Hao. The masked girl asked what the scum was up to. She swung her foot. Lin Hao was lucky enough to see her main feminine asset. He was embarrassed. A girl hit a drunk driver in the face with her heel. His face flattened from the impact. Lin was amazed that a stranger had helped him in his fight against the drunken beast. He realized that she was good. He continued to examine the pregnant woman and said that he would have to take a risk to save the baby. Everyone around him was stunned. Hao asked Jolan to put a respirator on the woman. He was preparing to start the operation. The charming policewoman asked the doctor how she could help. He replied that she was a traffic cop, not a doctor. She took his hint and said she'd make sure the ambulance could get through here without any problems. There are Baihui, Shenting, Fengqi, Juwei, Guanyuan intermediate Chugu points. If handled correctly, you can save a life. A policewoman was near the body of an injured civilian. She shouted to the doctor that he was not stopping bleeding and asked to see him. Lin Hao looked over the injured man's body. He didn't know what to do since there was no equipment near him. He said he could keep him alive for 20 minutes, but where's the ambulance? The nice policewoman said he could count on her, and an ambulance would arrive in the allotted 20 minutes. She started yelling to everyone watching to disperse immediately. She was yelling that an ambulance was coming and to get out of the way. People in the crowd shouted that the policewoman was beautiful and didn't want to leave. Someone asked if she wanted to be his girlfriend. The girl took a gun out of her holster and fired several shots into the sky. She said that they were interfering with police work. Lin Hao said it was a funny act on her part. Maybe she was just an intern. Jolan said the woman stood up and wanted to talk to him. The crying woman begged the doctor to save her sister-in-law and husband. Lin told her not to worry. He asked her to wait for an ambulance. The traffic cop was yelling for people to hurry up and spread out to give way for the ambulance. The paramedics were loading the pregnant woman into the car. Lin told Jolan that it was time for them to go. The drunk driver woke up and asked who had hit him so hard. His companion rejoiced that he was finally awake. The policewoman approached them and told them to follow her to the station. The girl called her a stupid police girl and told her not to get cocky. The police officer showed her identification, saying the man was charged with drunk driving and causing injury to others. The driver's companion asked if she had heard who his father was. He said that when his father let him out, he would give the policewoman a sweet life. The policewoman called them just arrogant losers. She didn't understand how anyone could be like that. She laughed at them. The girl was surprised as the doctor disappeared. She wondered if, having done good, he had not even given his name. Jolan told Lin that the method he used to save was complicated. She had only read about it in a book. She was surprised. She asked if he hurt his knees when he was saving the woman. Lin said it was no big deal. He added that he would treat them when he arrived. The pain in his knees was sharp and sudden. Lin Hao wondered, who were the two girls standing outside the clinic? Geije was nervous. She wanted to kill that poor doctor. Her friend reassured her, saying that he was the only one who could save them now. He realized why he felt so strange, for he had hit the jackpot. He was in a flirtatious mood. Jolan asked why he was staring like that. He also asked what they would do with this company on the ground. Lin Hao didn't quite understand what she was talking about, but it was about the gang of drug addicts he had promised to cure. He calmly walked to the clinic and told them that they were a whole day late, and if they didn't want to die, they should follow him. Gage angrily asked the doctor how dare he talk to patients like that. Her friend asked her to calm down. The addicts complained of pain. Gage stepped in and asked for something to be done because they were in pain. The doctor said they should wait for the chief. The girl was angry. The doctor's indifference to the patient's condition was driving her mad. She was furious. Jolan began to treat Lin Hao's wounded knees. She dripped liquid on the wound. Hao immediately started screaming in pain. The girl said it might hurt, but the wound still needed to be treated to prevent infection. He thanked her. In an instant, Jolan applied an ointment that cooled his wounded knees. He began to moan with pleasure. It felt really good. The girls who were watching were surprised. The sound seemed very strange to them. They were ashamed of him. The chief was surprised by the presence of Gege and Yan Su. He asked why Lin Hao had called him. Yan Dong complained to his uncle that the doctor had drugged him with substances. Gage told her uncle that they should leave as this was not a doctor but a quack. The chief said there was no need to jump to conclusions. Lin Hao said that it would be more difficult this time. Girls in general are difficult, plus they have quite a lot of needle marks. Yan Su became agitated and asked what was he talking about. She asked, did they really conspire to lure them here? Gege started shouting to Yan Su in a panic that it was time for them to run away from the clinic. The girls were frightened by the doctor's behavior. Dr. Lin Hao decided that he needed to stop the girls before they ran away from the clinic. He immediately pressed sharply on the acupuncture points on the girls' bodies. Both of them fell to the floor and were exhausted. Lin told the chief that since it's more difficult with girls, the price is doubled, and they also have to stay here. The chief said he was relying on him. Jolan was stunned by what she heard. She asked, did they really have to stay here? She said it would only happen over her dead body. The girls, too, expressed their disagreement with the doctor's decision. Gege began to resist. He ordered to give the medicine to Yan Dong and his cronies and their diarrhea would go away. He also asked the girls to follow him so he could examine them. The girls were agitated when he called them to check on them. Gege said she didn't want it, and Yan Su asked why she was shaking. Dr. Lin Hao said seriously and confidently that the reason she was shaking was because she was going through withdrawal. He grabbed the nervous Gege and held her tightly in his arms. She screamed that she felt sick and asked Yan Su to carry her home. Yan yelled for her not to worry. She was very cold and scared. She was in a panic. She cried out in tears that it was unbearable. Her behavior was indescribably strange. The doctor put his arm around her and asked her to calm down. He asked Jolan to prepare the medicine he had written in the morning. Gege was crying and wiping her tears, shouting that she felt sick and wanted to go home. Lin asked to bring them here. He yelled for her to close the doors and undress them. She didn't understand what he meant. He asked her to take off their clothes and rub the remedy on their backs. He yelled for her to not waste a minute and do it faster before the girls lost their minds. Jolan said that there was only enough medicine for one person. She asked what to do with Yan Su. He said she would have to endure the pain. The head of the village knocked on the door and shouted what was going on. The girl's belongings were lying on the floor. Hao told Yan Su that he would do his best to ease her pain, but she must overcome this desire on her own. Yan Su immediately slapped his face with her palm. His cheek turned red. She shouted that she wanted her dose. Jolan became nervous. Lin Hao shouted that everything was fine and asked her to take care of Gege. Yang tearfully begged for illegal substances. She shouted that they were all liars. She asked them to kill her. She couldn't find a place for herself. She screamed, why should she suffer? She asked to be killed. The pain was unbearable. Lin Hao hugged her out of pity, telling her not to give up. She bit him. Jolan shouted that it must be painful. Dr. Lin was sweating. He was very nervous. He continued to hug Yan Su tightly and said that everything would be fine. The doctor finally came out of the office. The chief was surprised and asked what was going on in there. Dune asked what happened to the girls. Hao punched him in the jaw. He called him a lowlife and asked why he dragged the girls away with him. The chief tried to calm Lin Hao down, saying that everything had already happened and beating him up wouldn't change anything. They just needed to think of something. Hao told the other junkies to forget everything that had gone before and asked them to come in for a checkup. They wondered why he had become sad. They were immediately alert, their faces filled with fear. They wondered why he had become sad. He asked them to take off their clothes and lie down on the medical bed. Yan Dong didn't want to take off his clothes since Jolan was still indoors. Dr. Lin Hao threatened him with a belt and asked if he would still refuse or would he still undress. He agreed to undress and asked not to be beaten. Yolan said that in that case she should go out. The doctor said no. The gender of the patient doesn't matter, and if she can't take it, she'll have to quit. Hao said he would go to the backyard to set up some tents, and Jolan would have to examine the patients. She was very uncomfortable, screaming at them not to get close to her. The addicts yelled that it was embarrassing. but that's what the doctor ordered. One of the guys said that to take the tests, you have to open your eyes first. Jolan accidentally pricked him in the buttock. He started screaming in pain. The addicts shouted that they would never molest her again. They begged to be let out. Their friends outside the door became nervous. Dr. Lin Hao told Gege and Yansu that he needed to examine them. His gaze was stern. Gage said that was enough of all that. Sue was already weakened. She asked why would he still need to examine them. He said they would have to live here for 2 months so he could make sure they didn't have any diseases. Yansu said that you can't give up. Yandong and his buddy ran away in tears. Dong shouted that they had been seen naked. His associate said that their clan's reputation was now ruined. Dr. Lin Hao called them idiots. He looked at the girls angrily and told them to undress. They looked at him angrily and asked if they had heard him. They did not understand why they had to take off their clothes. Gage stated that she would not undress in front of a man. The doctor said that if he had not been asked by the head, he would not have wasted his time on her. The girl said that she didn't think she was sick, and especially not in that way. Hao replied that he needed to make sure, since she was a drug addict. She started screaming that she didn't even have a boyfriend, she couldn't be sick. The doctor still argued that she was a drug addict. Gage got angry and asked him if he could not repeat this phrase time after time. He replied that he could, but then she would have to undress so he could examine her. Gage did not resist as it was useless. She began to take off her underwear. She stripped down to her full nakedness. She felt very uncomfortable, embarrassed by it all. The doctor asked the nurse to take Gage's blood for analysis. The girl asked for a quicker examination. She also said that as long as the nurse is here, Hao can do whatever he wants. He told her to do the analysis, and he would read the report afterward. He asked Gege to move his hair to the side. He exclaimed that there was no trace of allergy on his skin. Yolan drew blood for analysis. Lin Hao said that the inspection was over and called for the next one. He crossed Gege off the list. Geiji realized that it looked like her imagination had been playing too much, and it wasn't all that scary. Yansu walked into the office and asked if she needed to undress like the previous girl. He replied that it was only for a few minutes. The girl stripped naked. She asked to begin the examination sooner rather than later. Lin asked the nurse to take her blood. Jolan was astonished because Yansu had such snow-white skin, and she was still young. Her body was perfect. Lin Hao read the report with a serious face. He thought about it and realized that people with weak bodies were the most vulnerable. Jolan didn't understand what was wrong. The nurse began to fantasize. In her fantasy, the doctor asked her to let him take care of her. Lin Hao asked, what was she daydreaming about? He asked sending them to the backyard when they were done. All the young addicts were taken out to the backyard. Dr. Lin pointed them to the bucket and told them that there were many worms in the area. He told them that now it was their mission to dig up the worms and collect them in a bucket, and until the bucket was full, no one would be allowed to eat. Gage asked, how could he make her do something so hard when she was already barely alive after everything? Dr. Lin Hao bowed to the girl, saying that in that case there would be a special assignment for her. He tossed her a basin and told her to wash those clothes and sheets. His look was serious. Gage picked up the dirty clothes. They stank horribly. The girl said that picking worms would be much better. The doctor said he thought she would get through this task quickly, and then she could eat afterward. The girl could barely contain her vomiting. Yansu noticed the turtles in the aquarium. She was surprised because if they were sold, they would make 1,000,000 yuan. The blue-haired junkie said he was very tired, but he almost made it to the roots of the tree. Dune said frustratedly that they hadn't even harvested half of it. One of them said the doctor won't let them leave the confines of the clinic. They can't even dig for worms outside. Dune, looking at the moon, said that they used to have a beautiful life, but now he was collecting worms. The poor people were still given something to eat. One of them turned to Yandong. He told them to leave him alone. He said it was all because of Litten, but Dr. Lin told him that there was food prepared for them. Yan said he was in no mood to eat. Dong became sharply wary. He turned around abruptly and asked when the doctor had time to show up here. Hao replied to shut up and eat. He recalled the bucket full of worms. Yandong could barely hold back his tears and called his comrades idiots since they didn't even call out to him, but one of them said that he had called out to him. Nurse Jolan told Lin Hao that he had had a hard day and asked him to eat a little. He looked into the bowl of dinner the girl had served him. He said it looked amazing and asked if it was just for him. Jolan said that yes, it was for him. She also added that she had purposely added more eggs to it. She asked admiringly if Hao liked the food. He greedily ate his dinner and said he had never eaten anything better than those noodles. Suddenly a young guy came in. He told the doctor that the Dune family had a problem. He asked if he was here. Yan asked, "What's wrong?" The guy said that Dune's house was surrounded by 30 people, and their leader was a woman. She asked about his location. Yan's associate said they would go after him. Dong told the doctor he had to go. as he was having a bad time. Hao said he would go with them. Yandong's enemies smashed the blue car that belonged to his family. They did it without pity. The girl said that although Yan hid himself, he could not hide his house, and ordered him to destroy the place. She said she would burn down his house. Yandong and Lin Hao were astonished by this girl's presence. They couldn't believe their eyes. Hao asked the guy, did he really know who she was too? He looked at him angrily. The girl asked if Dune was tired of hiding. He asked how she had the nerve to follow him after all she had done to him. Hao asked if he was addicted to drugs because of her. Yan replied that she broke up with him and he couldn't bear it. He began to tell that the girl gave him a pack of cigarettes, which he shared with others, but they were laced with illegal substances. Yandong angrily asked her why she had brought so many people to his house. He didn't understand her intentions. He asked, is this really all about beating him up? He also asked if he was really that important to her. She asked what made him think people were brought in to beat him up. Who did he think he was? The girl pointed her finger at Lin Hao and threatened that he would pay for what happened in Guangzhou today. Lin said confidently and unafraid that he wasn't interested in courtesans like her. He mocked her. The girl was really pissed off about it. She ordered her subordinates to beat the crap out of him, and she didn't care if she died. Lin got into a fighting stance and was ready to fight. He asked the patients to stand back and protect the girls. The girls' mercenaries were dressed in black. They angrily told the wretched doctor to prepare for death. A merciless duel began. One of the guards swung his fist sharply at the doctor. Lin Hao immediately dodged and counterattacked his opponent with a sharp yet brutal leg kick. The rest of the mercenaries realized that the enemy wasn't that easy, so they needed to work together. But teamwork didn't solve anything at all in a fight against Lin Hao. He dodged and counterattacked. That was his tactic. He dodged the blows with the speed of the wind and continued to roll his opponents to the floor. The mercenaries had no time to resist as the doctor's speed was overwhelming. Lin Hao decided that he needed to capture the leader first before dealing with the others. One of the girl's mercenaries shouted for her to be careful, for the enemy was running straight at her. The girl was frightened. Hao walked closely to the girl and said that he had never hit a girl before, but he would make an exception for her. The girl was amazed at the doctor's fighting help, for even 30 men could do nothing to him. She pulled out a gun with a sharp movement and, pointing it at Lin Hao, told him not to move or else he would be killed. She yelled that if he moved, she would really shoot him. Hao looked at her coldly and thought, does she really want to intimidate him? He suddenly shouted that the police were already here. He pretended that panic had taken over his mind. The girl panicked because she was afraid of the police. She turned around, which played into the doctor's hands, and he grabbed the gun out of her hands. He held her hand tightly and whispered in her ear that she would have to go to jail for a while. The head of the village stood with the police officer by the car. He apologized for being late. Lin Hao said that they were not late at all, and asked the officer to arrest this gang. But unexpectedly, the policeman handcuffed not only the girl, but also Lin Hao himself. The boy couldn't understand why he was tied up too. The girl mocked him, saying that apparently his past was no better than hers. The village head was dumbfounded and wondered, why was Dr. Lin Hao also arrested? He told himself that he would get him out. A gang of drug addicts watched the whole thing. Yandong said that Uncle was unreliable, even though he had tons of money. The girls were in a panic. Jolan said that she believed that Lin Hao was special and would be able to handle it. By then, Lin had already been taken to the police station for identification and further clarification. The guy said it was that girl's gun, not his. The officer said they know everything, but the problem is that they can't identify Hao's identity. He started asking who he was because they had no fingerprints or any information to prove his identity. He asked if he was a spy. These words shocked young Lin Hao. The suspicion that he was a terrorist or a spy hit him. He began to cry and proved that it was all a misunderstanding, and he was not a spy but a simple village doctor. The police officer realized that the guy looked like the man his boss was looking for. Hao was the one in the photo who rescued the woman. The cop told his coworker that this guy is the one the boss was looking for. He was the one who saved the boss's family in that accident. The officer exclaimed that it was Lin who saved all those people 10 days ago. Hao said that since he was the benefactor of their boss, let them bring him here. The police officers kindly agreed to call the boss. Lin Hao rode with the boss in the police car. He told the supervisor that he was fine and he could walk home safely on his own. But the boss said he couldn't let him walk because he was his sister's savior, and he had been looking for him for a long time. Lin nervously asked if his sister was unharmed and how was the baby. The boss replied that they were safe, and his sister asked him to find him and thank him. Dr. Lin Hao replied that there was no need to worry, as it was his duty as a doctor. He asked what was the surname of the supervisor. He said his name was Shen Jingbin, and said that if the guy needed anything, he could go to him. Hao said in his mind that the man's name was very funny. He asked him if it would be difficult to get an ID card. The policeman replied that it was the easiest thing to do, and asked me to leave it all to him. The boss drove Lin home and said he would go to his sister's house for a couple of days and then bring the documents. Hao told him to mail them. The doctor got out of the car. The policeman said that he was satisfied with this arrangement and drove off. Lin Hao thought, is this really it? After all, he thought that he had offered something valuable, but documents weren't bad either. Yolan was glad to see him arrive. Hao turned around and wondered if she was still at the clinic. She immediately hugged him and clung to him tightly. She was very happy to see him. She hugged him tightly and in tears asked him if he knew how worried she was about him. Lin said he was fine and asked how his patients were doing. The girl said that while he was away, they were quiet. A confused Hao said that was all well and good, but if she continued to hug him like that, he couldn't find the words. Jolan lowered her eyes below his waist and realized he was overly aroused from the embrace. She immediately got angry and yelled that he was a pervert. She slapped him and pushed him away from her. Jolan took the boy's hand and told him they should go home. She promised to cook something delicious. Lin asked, "What's wrong?" They came home. Zhen Yao shouted nervously to pick up his patients as he was tired of them. Gege was surprised at Hao's return. The doctor told the patients that they really surprised him, as they didn't even try to hide during his absence. Geje, Yansu, and Yandong frowned, asking how could he think such a thing about them. They declared that they were unshakable. Dong, barely holding back tears, asked the doctor to help him, complaining about his poor condition. Hao said he would take the case seriously. He slapped the guy lightly and asked the nurse to find some rope and then tie him to a tree. Dun got angry and asked, "Is he crazy?" he shouted. "Why did they do this to him?" The doctor said they were short of drugs and there were a lot of patients, so they would have to be patient. Dun said that acupuncture would help him. Lin replied that acupuncture would not work right now. As such, we would have to be patient. He told the nurse that if anyone got sick, she would have to tie them to a tree and put wormwood next to them. Eventually, all the patients were tied to the tree. Gege wondered what the hell was going on. She began to shout and resent her. Why did they tie her to the tree? Dun asked her to be quiet, for the doctor had fought 30 men yesterday. The nurse said they were all tired these days, but the doctor had the most trouble and asked to let him rest. She said he may seem easygoing, but he's actually the most responsible doctor she's ever known. She went on to say that he, more than anyone else, deserves to be called a doctor. Suddenly, a man in a police uniform knocked on the door. Jolan was immediately frightened and ran to wake up the doctor. Lin Hao was sleeping soundly at his desk. The nurse started to wake him up. She yelled for him to get up as someone was looking for him. The man was still waiting outside the door. Lin Hao was saying through his sleep that Jolan's feet were cute. He said that they were very soft. He was drooling. Jolan grabbed his face with anger and yelled at him to wake up. She angrily asked, "What is this idiot dreaming about?" Lin clutched his face as he was in pain. He came out of sleep and asked her to be gentle, and asked who else was looking for him. It turned out to be the woman he had saved. She was happy to meet Dr. Lin Hao. Jingbin was with her and said he was happy to meet her too. Lin rejoiced, telling them to take a seat. He congratulated the woman on the birth of her child. He asked, "Who is the man with glasses?" Shen Jingbin said that it was his sister's husband, and they came today to hand something over. He handed Lin Hao a folder of documents that was tied with white threads. In the packet were documents such as graduation certificate, driver's license, high school diploma, Idaho card, and even health insurance. Lin was pleasantly surprised and told Shen that he didn't expect to get anything but an ID card. Shen replied that his son-in-law had helped him with all this. Hao said that it looks like his son-in-law has a high position. Jingbin replied that it was not something he could spread about. The officer, unexpectedly to Lin Hao, kneeled down in front of him. The doctor was dumbfounded. He asked what he was doing here since it was different times and he shouldn't be doing this. The woman said they really wanted to thank him for saving them. Lin replied that it was his duty as a doctor and he did not want them to kneel, but some sort of reward would not be refused. The policeman apologized and said he was in a great hurry. He said he didn't have a few million yuan and apologized again. Lin said he appreciated Mrs. Shen coming all the way here, and the documents are already a big price to pay for the treatment. He said the newborn had jaundice and handed over a medicine that would help. Everyone was amazed, for he had recognized the disease by sight. Lin told Miss that it was already getting dark, and she should go home and not make such a journey as today. After all, she had recently given birth. The man with glasses said that if there were any problems, Hao should call his phone number and gave him some paper. Lin looked at the man and thanked him. But in his mind, he told himself that this man looked so old, as if from Mr. Shen's father. Lin Hao took the piece of paper and unfolded it. He was very curious as to what it contained. Unfolding the piece of paper, Lin was shocked. It contained the car keys. Just then, Jolan entered the office. She told the doctor that they had left, but the BMW X6 was still there. Lin Hao was dumbfounded. Had they really paid for his help with a car and a phone number? Jolan said that this car is even better than the chairman. Hao said that a piece of paper and a car in exchange for 3 lives is good. He unfolded the piece of paper and noticed that it said Green Gang to come. You just need to call if you need help. Lin Hao gave it some serious thought and realized that Z Lighting's father's gang. He realized that it looked like these people wouldn't just give up. He clutched the leaf tightly. Jolan warily asked, "Is this really about Zhen Xiang?" She was frightened. Lin Hao asked, "Did she really know him?" His faces were just as wary. The nurse replied that he was the deputy mayor of Guangzhou. He said he now realized why he was so arrogant. Gege and Yansu were admiring the doctor's new car, they said. Lin Hao shouted to the girl that if word of this got out, he would punish her. Lin started to leave. The nurse asked him where he was going. He said it was nothing. He just needed to make a phone call. He stood behind a tree and hastily dialed the phone number on his push-button phone. In the course of the phone conversation, he asked Mr. Shen what to do about the BMW. He was wary. Mr. replied that it was his sister's idea. Since Hao's past car was worthless, he said the car was bought with their family's savings, so Lin could not worry, because everything is legal. Shen also added that it's registered to his sister's company, so there's no need to worry. Lin said that it was too expensive a gift. Mr. replied that compared to saving their lives, it was all a small thing. That's what his sister said. Lastly, he said that Z Lighting's father is the leader of the Green Gang, and the drunk driver is out on bail, so the doctor needs to be careful. Lin Hao told himself that he had gotten too many problems after he returned to the village. Gege began to shout and call out to Lin Hao. He shouted for the warden to pay attention to her. The doctor turned around and she said she was sick of digging for worms because it was boring. Yansu said that being locked up will not cure addiction. Lin Hao said that they would have to be patient until next Wednesday. He realized that the Green Gang would not wait. They would make a move this week. Yansu was overjoyed because they would be able to visit the Lost Soul Hills. There was no limit to her joy. The doctor said that in their condition, a hike to the village would be enough. Yan said she wanted to see if there were any golden turtles. Lin Hao asked in surprise, was she really interested in turtles? Yansu said that after rehabilitation she planned to start breeding them. Her peers were surprised and said it was cool because she had already decided what she wanted to do in life. The others squatted down and began discussing what they would do after rehab. An exhausted Lin Hao passed out and fell into a deep sleep right behind the desk. Jolan was surprised, saying that he was very exhausted lately. She asked the patients to help her carry him to his bed. Lin Hao was sleeping in the bed. He was once again highly aroused. Through his sleep, he asked Jolan to scratch his ass. The nurse was outraged by this and wondered what kind of obscenities he was dreaming about. She shouted for him to get up. She warily told him that there were no more worms left that they wouldn't dig up, and asked him to find something to do to cheer them up. The doctor got out of bed and walked out into the corridor, yawning. He looked at his patients and thought about the task at hand. He asked the nurse to take the patients to the barber shop because he was cutting his eyes with those colors. Yan Dong angrily said that he spent a lot of time to make such a hairstyle. The doctor asked, did he really not want to go? He said confidently that those who did not wish to leave could stay and enjoy the belt. The patients immediately started running away as hard as they could because they were frightened. Hao shouted for them to buy new clothes. Lin Hao was bored, as he hadn't had any patients lately. He decided to see what books old man Jinyao had. He discovered an erotic magazine that had an adorable girl on the cover. At the same time, a beige-colored car approached the clinic. An unknown man stuck his foot out of it. One of the men asked if this clinic was here and if they had the wrong address. The unknown men were standing right in front of the entrance of the clinic where Dr. Lin Hao was. The formidable long-haired man told his subordinates to follow him, for they were to find out who the damn doctor was. They quietly walked into the clinic. Lin Hao was looking at an erotic magazine and told the man to take a seat. He politely asked if the man was for an appointment or some other matter. The man replied that yes, he was for an appointment. Dr. Lin Hao asked him to extend his arm so he could feel his pulse. The man complied with his request. He said with a serious face that the man had a serious illness. He paid attention to the guards and realized that it would not be so easy to deal with them. The man became wary and with a serious face asked what the doctor had detected and what disease he had. Hao said it was hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and hyperglycemia. He suggested that the man had a heart attack a month ago. The man was pleasantly surprised and said the guy was a very savvy professional. Lin Hao calculated everything in his head and said that it would take 3 months to completely cure the disease. He also said that if the patient doesn't believe, He can give the medication right away so that he can feel the effects himself. The man started scratching his ear and said he thought the kid guessed he wasn't here for medical help at all. Lin Hao continued to fill out the form and said that anyone who enters this door becomes his patient. He asked what the man's name was. The man replied that his name was Pomeshchik. Lin said he asked for a name, not a nickname. The man said roughly and confidently that his real name was Zi Chengde. He looked at the doctor with a serious gaze. The doctor collected the medicine and handed the box to the man. He said it should be taken twice a day, 2.5 hours after meals. Lin coldly looked at the patient and asked his age. The man replied that he was 50 years old. Hao said that he looked older than 60. He emphasized that a man better not overwork himself. The man said enough of this nonsense, it was time to talk business. Lin said he knew he came because of Z lighting. Lin Hao suggested to talk first, and if that didn't help, then he would move on to the fight. He was sure that there were more than 3 of them. One of the guards asked why not just finish the guy off. The other ordered him not to do anything without a command from the boss. The man was wary, for it was as if the boy had read his mind. He asked Hao not to misunderstand him, but he addresses him like a father. Lin Hao said that his daughter was overly defiant, and this would be a big lesson for her. He said that he wouldn't be able to get her out. The man smiled slyly and asked, "How about he gives the doctor 100,000 yuan? He said that Zhenxian would not refuse Ling if he asked for lighting to be released. After all, he is his family's benefactor. Lin Hao thought about the old man's suggestion and said that if he asked, she would indeed be released. The old man asked if he agreed. Lin Hao slung the sack on his shoulder and coldly asked, would the old man agree to such a deal? The old man was astonished. He asked, since that was not enough, what amount of money did the fellow wish to get for this favor? Lin Hao smiled slyly and asked, how much money did the man even have available? The old man replied with a smile that he had worked hard for many years so he would have 2 or 3 billion. Hao was dumbfounded. The sly guy said if he gave him everything, he'd be doing him a favor. It would also prove that he cared about his daughter. The angry man asked if he knew he was in charge of the area and killing the kid would be nothing to him. Lin Hao immediately swung his fist at him. The man was dumbfounded as he had not expected such an outcome. The man's body was tightly wrapped around the doctor's arms. He didn't understand what was even happening. He nervously asked, did the pathetic kid really think of killing him? Lin stared fearlessly into his eyes. The old man's guards were watching everything that was going on and asked what this ignoramus was allowing himself. Lin Hao continued to strangle the old man and coldly told them to stay back or else he would snap his neck. The guards were wary and extremely agitated. They asked him to do something stupid. The old man shouted that he was choking. Lin told him that he didn't care who he was, a landowner or the head of a green gang. He asked him to speak politely and then he would have a conversation with him, and to threaten him was to seek his death. Lin Hao let go of the old man's neck. The bandit had already almost passed out from suffocation. He fell to his knees with helplessness, his eyes red and bulging. He tried to catch his breath. The old man's chain dogs immediately swooped down on the doctor, wanting him dead. They were ready to wipe him off the face of the earth. The 2 bodyguards immediately began to swing their fists at Lin Hao, who was alone. Lin Hao realized that the enemies were advancing. He urgently needed to come up with a plan of action to defeat the enemies. The nimble and unruly doctor immediately brushed aside the blows of his opponents and deftly slipped from the encirclement. He shouted that if they wanted to fight him, it would be better to do it outside as it was crowded indoors. One of the bodyguards yelled to the guy that if he had guts, he should stop and fight. He asked, is he really going to run away like that? Lin asked, are they planning to pounce on him in 2s or 1 at a time? The cocky guard with the bandaged head confidently declared that he would be first. Lin realized that if the 2 of them attacked together, he would lose. The bodyguard told him not to expect to win even if they fought one-on-one. He said it was nothing personal. It was just his job. Hao realized that judging from his physique, he was in the special forces. He realized that he needed to finish with these ignoramuses as soon as possible, as he would be able to fight for a long time. The guard asked him to show what he could do. Lin moved very nimbly and swiftly approached his opponent. He struck in a sneak attack, something his opponent had not expected. He fell backwards, confused. He praised the guy's punch, saying that it looked like he wasn't exactly a regular doctor. His jaw ached after the blow. The man was enraged. He shouted that he would not allow himself to be defeated. He announced a second round. Lin Hao realized that with this man's abilities, he could not be allowed to punch him in the face. The bodyguard shouted that the guy could no longer avoid being hit. He started trying to surround him. He shouted that it was time for the guy to go to hell and swung his fist in a sharp motion. This time, Lin Hao did not have time to react and evade the blow. The force of the blow threw him into the wall. The second bodyguard watched everything with a smile and said that he apparently wouldn't even have to do anything. The bodyguard approached the lying Lin Hao and asked, "Can't he even move?" The guy at this moment took a stone in his hand. He jumped up sharply from the ground and struck his face with a rock. He asked the guard if his face was stronger than the stone. The second bodyguard was dumbfounded by such an act. He asked if he had acted like a rat and hit him with a stone. Lin exclaimed that all means are good in war, and this was not a gentleman's duel, but a battle for survival. The green-haired guard looked at his comrade and realized that the blow was hard, because he was not moving. He decided to fight the guy. There was the sound of lightning. The bodyguard accelerated to deliver a fatal blow to the enemy. Lin Hao was stunned and watched with his mouth open. He didn't know what would happen next. The opponent delivered a deft right kick, which the guy managed to dodge. Lin Hao was nervous. He realized it was a Muay Thai kick. He realized that he had to be more careful. Suddenly, the opponent delivered another kick to the guy's body. The force of the blow was incredibly powerful. Lin Hao tried to counterattack his opponent, but he knocked him down with his forceful punch. Lin was stunned by his incredibly powerful attack. The impact made his fist go numb. He was in shock. The enemy was running at him and yelling that the guy's dirty tricks wouldn't work on him, and now he was going to get his ass kicked. The face of the fleeing enemy was incandescent with fear. His face was fierce and ferocious, ready to rip and throw. But Lin Hao was not one of the cowardly ones. He shouted that he shouldn't underestimate him and told his enemy to accept death with dignity. The opponent was ferocious. He didn't waste a moment talking and struck with his fist. Lin Hao deftly dodged the blow. The bodyguard tried to throw another series of punches. Lin realized that he kept hitting without stopping. He decided that he would strike when he paused to rest. As his opponent was about to deliver a final sharp punch with his fist, the unexpected happened. Lin intercepted his arm on impact. The man realized that normal attacks weren't working, so he decided to use acupuncture. He was alert, sweat dripping from his face. He couldn't understand what was happening to his shoulder, for it was twitching non-stop. Lin Hao decided to take the chance and deliver a finishing blow to his opponent while he was powerless. The guy launched a successful series of attacks. The opponent fell to his knees as he lost his coordination. The man fell to the floor unconscious, foam flowing out of his mouth. Lin mocked him, for he couldn't even stand up. The old man watched the fight from the sidelines. He told himself that he never thought this guy could handle his bodyguards. The sun was setting over the horizon. A blue sign appeared in the orange sky. It was a signal that help was needed. Lin Hao acted coolly. He wondered how many others were still willing to fight him. A huge crowd of people were running towards him. They were the old man's mercenaries who had come to avenge their comrades. The old man mockingly said that it seemed the boy was ready to fight 100 more opponents, and he had just that many. Lin looked angrily at his enemy and advised him to be ashamed. He asked if he really wanted to sick 100 men on him. Hao laughed in his opponent's face. He said sarcastically that he was scared and his legs were shaking. He realized that he had wasted a lot of energy in the past fights and couldn't handle 100 people. The only thing he can do is to take Zi Chenai hostage. A girl in a black coat asked the guy standing with her if this was the village they wanted. She said it looked lively. She rejoiced and told herself that today was the day she would finally meet Dr. Lin. The guards glared angrily at the enemy and prepared to fight. One of them said that they should attack together, so that he would be exhausted. Lin wondered, would he really end his life so ignominiously in this fight? The man exclaimed, "Is that really the landlord?" He asked, what was he doing here in the first place? The old man turned around as he was stunned. He asked who was there calling him. Lin also wondered who it was that was calling for the old man. The guards parted. It was a charming girl in a black coat and her colleague, a man in a green jacket. The girl asked the old man that in the few days of her absence, had he acquired the nerve to speak in her presence in such a tone. Lin wondered what those two were doing. He remembered that he had seen them somewhere before. Old man Si Chengde turned around and was shocked by the appearance of Mr. and Mrs. Xia. He asked what had brought them here. Mr. Xia shouted to Lin Hao that he was very happy to see him since they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He asked if he remembered him. Hao's eyes filled with joy as he remembered these people. He rejoiced immediately. He looked at Miss Xia coquettishly. He said that of course he remembered because a body as beautiful as Miss Xia's was impossible to forget. The girl immediately slapped his face with the palm of her hand, telling him to shut up. She called him an asshole. One of the guards asked who they were, and how dare they behave so boldly in front of the Green Gang. Mr. Xia's gun was immediately put to his forehead. The guard immediately closed his mouth and began to sweat in fear. Xia asked the landowner if his man was so ignorant that he decided to interrupt their conversation. The old man asked to have mercy on the fool. Lin Hao watched all of this from the side. He was trying to figure out what was going on, because the landlord was afraid of them. Mr. Sia lit his cigarette beautifully with his lighter pistol. He said that Lin could rest and he would handle all of this. Hao was astonished, since the guy was threatening with an ordinary lighter. He thought that he must have a strong backing. Sia said that Dr. Lin saved his sister's life. Now he is under the protection of the Juni Tang gang. From now on, his enemies are the enemies of the gang. Sia said that there was no need to explain the relationship between their gangs, but still instructed the landlord to do so. Finished talking, he told the Green Gang to get the hell out of here. He said the sight of them made him sick. The landlord and his men were already walking away, but Lin Hao stopped him, asking for a moment of his attention. The old man immediately turned around and kindly asked, what was wrong with Dr. Lin Hao? The doctor approached him and said in a calm tone that he had forgotten to take his medicine. He held it out to him, but here Lin said that he would even discount the old man, eventually charging him 9,999 for the admission. The old man looked at him with eyes wide with surprise. He was stunned by such a huge sum. Zi Chengde didn't argue and threw a wad of money on the table. He said that it contained 10,000 for medicine. Lin asked him to stop. The old man asked what else he needed from him. The guy handed him one bill, saying that he didn't need other people's money. Angry Zi could barely contain his emotions. He wanted to pounce on the guy, but he had to restrain himself and thanked the doctor. After that, he ordered his bodyguards to follow him. They began to leave. Mr. Sia said there was no need to worry as this little ganga would not bother the doctor again. Lin asked, are they really from Juntang's gang? He eyed them warily. Miss Zia replied that of course they were from this gang. Otherwise, why would this old man be so scared? Sia said that their intervention today could be seen as payment for saving his sister. Hao replied that he could have done it himself. Miss Sia asked, does he really mean to say that he would have handled these people by himself? Hao said that he alone would be enough for 100 people. Miss wondered, would he really be able to do everything himself? Lin told her to follow him as she needed to be examined once. She asked why, because she was already fine. Mr. Sia got nervous as his sister started to lose her temper. He made a decision to go somewhere else. Dr. Lin was affectionate with the girl. He asked her to let him check if she still had any scars on her thigh. The girl did not tolerate such behavior and immediately put a gun to his temple. She asked him to guess if it was a lighter. Hoa was dumbfounded. She continued to hold the gun to his head and belabored him for undressing her. He replied that it was an emergency. She yelled that she didn't care about that. The fact remained he had completely undressed her. Dr. Lin Hao was not afraid of the gun at his temple. He coldly said that he had saved her with this action. He said that for a doctor, the gender of the patient didn't matter. He only wanted to save her life. Miss Sia didn't listen to him. She was ready to let the hook down. Dr. Lin didn't take kindly to such behavior. He lost his temper and started shouting that yes, he had undressed her. Would she really kill him now? Zia was wary. The girl loaded the gun. The doctor admitted he was wrong and promised not to undress her again. The apology worked on the girl. She said that was where she should have started. Lin Hao said that he should have let her die back then, and he wouldn't have a situation like this now. These words hurt Miss Zia. She became angry and insulted the doctor, calling him a cretin. Hao said that if he knew she was so ungrateful, he wouldn't have saved her. He asked, did she really think he was happy to be undressed? He said he could see her big breasts and shapely legs without her, and unless there was an urgent need to help her, he wouldn't waste his time. Miss Sia warily asked if she even had a conscience. She said that he had taken advantage of the opportunity and now pretended that nothing had happened. The doctor said that if she felt that way, he could take off his clothes so she could look at his body all she wanted. Miss Sia was angry about these words and this kind of behavior of the doctor. She put the gun to his body. He started asking her not to point the gun at him anymore. He was admitting his guilt. Lin asked the girl to lift her skirt to look at her wound. Zia replied that there was no need to do so, as it was already healed. He said she better not use the gun anyway, or her ulna and ligaments will suffer. Mr. Sia was surprised that his sister didn't freak out. He asked if they were done. Hao said yes and asked what was on the table. Zia said it was compensation for medical expenses. The doctor asked, what would be the amount if you add up 20,000 and 30,000? Mr. Zia said he will add another 20,000 since his sister gave birth with a silver spoon. She is worth it. Lin Hao said that it was still not enough. He reminded about the lighter that Sia used to fool people. Mr. laughed, saying the doctor was greedy. He did not refuse to give him the lighter as a courtesy. Lin Hao rejoiced, for he had once again earned something with his strength. Nurse Yolan shouted that they had already returned. The doctor told the nurse the whole story that had happened to him. He said there was 50,000 on the table for medical care. He said he was fine. He also told the guys that they had changed a lot. He was delighted with them. The doctor said he couldn't even recognize them. The trio of former drug addicts were transformed. They became more well-groomed. Lin said they looked much better now and also asked where were the others. A woman's voice shouted for the minder to pay attention. The doctor couldn't understand what was happening. Yeon-soo said she didn't understand why they went to the barber shop with the guys. Gage said it wouldn't be long before they could leave, so she wanted to dress up to leave a good impression. The doctor was stunned and remembered that they had already recovered from drug addiction. He asked if they had decided what they were going to do. Gage happily stated that when she gets out, she wants to be a singing actress. The doctor said that was a great idea. Hao asked the boys what they were going to do. Dong replied that Uncle wanted them to join the army, and he had already registered 5 of them. Lin Hao said that he was very happy that they were all starting a new life. Gege was angry because he kept asking the others, forgetting about her. She immediately shouted that she was leaving tomorrow. She asked the doctor if he had anything to tell her. The doctor asked in bewilderment, what is it that he has to tell her? Gege angrily shouted that he was pissing her off. Yandong asked what Yeon-soo thought about it. She said she would stay at the clinic for another month, but she wanted to breed golden turtles. Nurse Jolan was amazed that the girl wanted to stay here for another month. Hao said she is very weakened and may need more treatment. Is something wrong? The nurse said there was nothing wrong. Gija asked why she needed these injections. Wasn't she cured? Lin Hao replied that only one was needed, and it was only for her. It made her happy that he was just for her. One of the guys said she seemed to like the doctor. He asked his friend if he had a chance. Dr. Lin wondered if the last injection was so effective, since the girl's face had turned so red. Yandong walked over to the doctor and thanked him for showing them another way. Suddenly, something happened that he didn't expect at all. The boys knelt down in front of him. He shouted, "What are they doing?" The boys continued to worship him, for to them he was the man who had saved them. The doctor started yelling for them to stand up. He said they should not kneel to anyone but their parents. Yandong said that they wouldn't have been able to reach this far without him. He said it was unnecessary. They could just give him a treat sometime. Yan-sun smiled sweetly and suggested a barbecue to thank the doctor. The guys supported the idea. They set a sumptuous table for their esteemed doctor. Everyone sat down to eat. Dr. Lin Hao praised them, saying that the barbecue was excellent. It was very tasty to him. Geiji gently pressed herself against him and asked if he could feed her. The doctor was surprised. Nurse Jolan became jealous of the doctor. He wondered if Gege had fallen ill again. Everyone looked at her. Dune thought she really liked the doctor. The nurse thought that she didn't like that kind of girl, did she? A frustrated Gege asked the doctor if he really felt nothing for her. He only asked her to help him, saying that she was drunk. Lin Hao affectionately whispered in the cute girl's ear to fall asleep. She immediately fell into a dream state. Lin told himself that if he had grown up here since childhood, he would have been very happy. The day of parting had come. The doctor looked at Gege, who was sitting on the steps. He couldn't figure out who it was. Yeon-soo said that they had come to say goodbye. Everyone was packed and ready to enter a new life. Dr. Lin was happy to see the boys. He said that since they were leaving to join the army, he wished them good luck. Gage called him over to her, saying she had something to tell him. He wished her luck and told her not to forget him being famous. The girl took his cheeks and thanked him for everything. She asked him to give her a hug before they left. Lin Hao happily hugged the cute girl. She, feeling the warmth of his embrace, decided to kiss him. She began to kiss his lips gently. Lin was astonished by the girl's action. He had not expected such an outcome. Gage said she initially thought they had a doctor-patient relationship, but now that it was necessary to leave, she realized she had fallen in love with him. Lin Hao was stunned by Yan Gege's confession. He couldn't find the words to express his emotions and asked her not to joke around like that. Everyone else was as amazed as the doctor. Their words of surprise were different, but the meaning was the same. Dong yelled that she likes to make fun of people. Hao said that if she didn't stop joking around like that, he would torture her. Gage said she's already used to it, and even if he tortures her, she'll still love him. Lin Hao's surprise was unbounded. He couldn't believe that she had fallen in love with him. Gage admitted that she had made a joke and was called to play the second heroine in one movie. She asked him how he liked her acting. Dr. Lin Hao praised the girl's acting, saying that she had almost fooled him. He realized her words made him feel lost. He said it was time and the boys had to go. Yan Gege smiled at the doctor and said goodbye to him. She told him not to forget her. Lin Hao sat in his room and recalled the scene of saying goodbye to Yan Gege. He remembered her shouting from the car for him not to forget about her. He sat at the desk in the study and did not raise his head. Yolan sensed something wrong. Suddenly, Zhen Yao opened the door and beckoned his daughter over, saying that he wanted to talk to her about something. Lin Hao slept at the table. His sleep was very sound and he was not disturbed at all by the conversation between father and daughter. Jolan asked her father what he wanted. He asked her how is it going with Lin Hao. She replied that it was pretty good and he was like a brother to her. This answer infuriated Zhen Yao, and he asked if she had even considered starting a relationship with him. She didn't understand what her father was even talking about. After all, she was older than Hao by a full 5 years. Zhen Yao said that she would be able to make love longer. Jolan shouted for him to stop. The girl got angry about it and said she didn't want to talk about it. She left the premises. Her father tried to stop her. The father began to tell his daughter that although he didn't like Lin, he was an outstanding person and perfectly suited to be a husband. Jolan was frustrated thinking about all this. She realized that Hao was very talented. She was sure that many girls would like him. She watched the sunset frustratedly. She was completely depressed. At one point, the girl was surprised, for she noticed that there was some construction going on again. Someone yelled at her to be careful as a construction material that was on a crane almost fell on her. Jolan, after reflecting on her personal life, decided to return back to the clinic building. Upon entering, she found that her father wasn't here, which meant she could rest in peace. She heard Yansu's voice, so she decided to go to the door. She opened the door slightly to see what Lin Hao and Su were doing. Yan was having a heated discussion with the doctor. The girl asked why they don't mate anymore. Lin said that the turtles are shy because they are looking at them. Jolan was watching this. She said that they look good together, and she could only be something like a sister to him. Yansu asked the doctor to sell her all her turtles. He replied that it would cost her a fortune. Jolan warily watched everything going on outside the door. She was jealous of the doctor. Yansu said that she had accumulated about 30 million over the years, and if she asked for more from Uncle Yan, it should be enough. Lin said it wasn't a problem if she bought them all, but how long did she plan to breed them? The girl replied that for the rest of her life. Lin Hao realized that she was business savvy, as turtle breeding was a lucrative business. Jolan disturbed the doctor by asking if he could give her a moment of his attention and approach her. He asked her what was wrong. She asked him to walk her home tonight. He asked why if she always went home alone. Jolan warned him to watch what he ate or it would be unpleasant. Lin laughed off this warning, saying that he wasn't very picky about food, and it couldn't happen to him since he was a doctor. Jolan immediately started yelling for him to become picky about his food from now on, and not to eat anything he couldn't digest. Lin Hao was astonished and asked what was wrong with her. Was she sick or had her critical days come? She said that none of this happened, and asked him to remember her words and think about his personal life. Hao didn't understand anything. He walked into the room with the turtles and told Yansu to stop following them and come over to him. Lin told her that she wasn't sleeping in the tent tonight and asked her to move in with him. Yan was flabbergasted. Hao said he was joking and there would be no one in the treatment room today so she could sleep there. Yansu seemed upset that it was a joke. She said there was some noise coming from the turtles' room again and went to see if they were laying eggs. Lin Hao realized that it looked like the girl was seriously into turtles. He looked into the room and was dumbfounded. Yansu stood in a seductive pose and literally tempted Dr. Lin Hao. He couldn't control his body. The girl noticed the doctor looking at her perversely. She covered herself and wondered where he was staring. Lin Hao asked not to be misunderstood. He had just come to see what she was doing here. Yansu said she was thinking about a turtle factory. She also said that the doctor's nose was bleeding and asked if everything was okay. Suddenly, the girl lost consciousness and began to fall to the floor. Lin Hao was stunned. He wondered why she suddenly fainted. Was it because of low blood sugar? He immediately went with her to the room to help her. The girl was making unintelligible noises. Yansu was put on an IV, and all that was left was to wait for her to regain consciousness. The girl woke up and asked what was wrong. Had she once again passed out? Lin said that her body was still weakened, and she had stood under the sun for too long by all accounts. It was all due to severe hypoglycemia. She asked warily, why had he pulled the needle out if there was still solution in the IV? Lin Hao firmly grabbed the girl's body to flip her onto her stomach. He was determined. The girl was stunned as she did not understand his intentions. She did not resist as she did not know what was happening. She asked why on earth did he turn her over. She told him to stop or she would scream. Lin said no one would hear her. The girl was embarrassed, but she said she had speed so he better not go near her. Lin Hao said that he was her doctor. How could it be that he couldn't notice her illness? Yan realized that this wouldn't work with him. He sternly told her to lie still, otherwise she would be in a lot of pain. The doctor held the girl tightly. She didn't know what to do because in this position she wouldn't be able to resist him if he decided to do something. The girl tried to resist with every curve of her body, but she wasn't very good at it. She wondered what he was doing. She didn't know what he was doing, but it made her feel good. Lin Hao began to rub and gently massage the girl's skin. Yansu enjoyed every movement of the doctor. His hands were very gentle. It was very pleasant for her. The girl felt as if every muscle in her body had relaxed. Lin told himself that now she knew what kind of massage technique he possessed. He finished giving the massage and asked how she would appreciate his skills. He complimented that it was only for VIP clients. He unfortunately did not get an answer to his question. Yansu relaxed so much that she fell asleep. Lin Hao was surprised after all. It was his massage that made her fall asleep. Blood was flowing from his nose again. Yansu continued to sleep. Her posture seduced Dr. Lin. She was really arousing him. Lin realized what Zhoulan meant when she told him to watch what he ate. It turned out to be a test of his will. The doctor decided to take a chance and started to feel Yansu's butt. But he stopped as he realized he was losing control. He decided to take a cold shower to ward off those thoughts. He decided to take a cold shower to get those thoughts out of his head. Morning came. The weather was gorgeous. Yansu shouted to the doctor that 4 more turtles had been born. Lin, yawning, said what is called hatching, not birth. He wondered how she got up so early. She replied that it was because of the massage. She replied that thanks to his massage, she went to bed early, so she woke up early too. Lin Hao held in his hand a full basin of clothes that had been arranged to be washed. Yansu saw the basin in his hands and offered to help do the laundry. The doctor nervously replied that he could do it himself. Lin told himself that this was the 2nd time in a month. If she kept seducing him like this, he would be able to hold back. The door to the clinic was ajar, and someone asked in a calm voice if anyone was there. Dr. Lin Hao was happy that the clinic finally had new customers at last. Lin walked out into the lobby of the clinic and was amazed. Had all these people really come to see a doctor? The old gruff grandfather asked if he knew what time it was, why the clinic was still closed. The doctor replied that it was only 7 o'clock in the morning. He told the old man that he was looking for trouble. Nurse Jolin congratulated the doctor on a good morning, asking if he had had breakfast. She was surprised to see so many people. She was surprised at Uncle Fang, and asked if he was here for an appointment. She told Lin Hao to be careful, for the old man had a terrible temper. The old man shouted for her not to speak behind his back as he was neither blind nor deaf. He shouted to the doctor that he had heard that he had cured the 8 demons in Fan Tong, but his illness was much more serious. He said that there was nothing the doctor could do, so he asked him to give him 2 injections of painkiller. Lin Hao was infuriated by this kind of behavior. The nurse said with horror that his nickname was Fan Sanda. He was a brigadier general in the Vietnam War, and even Uncle Yan respects him. She added that he is the only person in the village who receives government allowance, and whoever offends him will regret it. Lin concluded that this was just a testy old man taking advantage of age. He said that his specialty was communicating with such. He told the old man that his bullet wound to his shoulder had caused atrophy of the joint tissue, and asked, "Is that supposed to hurt?" The man was amazed. He said that even without hearing about the problem, the doctor was able to diagnose the problem. Lin said that even experts in large hospitals can help, so he asked for painkillers so as to insult him. The old man told him not to be too arrogant, and if he didn't cure him, he would be banished from the village. Lin Hao confidently asked what would happen if he could cure him. The man said that if he did manage to cure him, he would put up memorial plaques for him. He also promised that he would pray for him every year in festival. Lin called him crazy after hearing that. The old man indignantly interrogated the young doctor. How dare he call him that? Jolan asked Lin to agree with him. After all, he was older. But he replied that he had already allowed the old man a lot. The other one he would have beaten up by now. The old man started shouting, "How did the guy have the guts to talk to his elders like that?" Lin shouted without fear, shouting back. The man said he would give him a silk scroll if he cured him. Hao didn't argue because he realized that he wouldn't offer anything good. He told the man to lie down on a medical couch for examination. The old man lay down and asked the doctor why he had to lie down on a medical bed. The doctor smiled wryly and said it would be very quick, without any injections or medication. He told himself he would pull on the left and pull on the right and make the old man into a baby. He began to apply pressure to certain parts of his body. The old man screamed with pleasure. He was indescribably pleased. He hadn't felt such pleasure in a long time. The nurse asked if everything was all right. Lin Hao replied that she shouldn't worry because the old man was having a good time. One of the patients standing outside the door said the eerie sounds gave him goosebumps. Yansu became wary and wondered, who is it that is making these sounds and shouting at the top of his voice? She carefully looked out the window and was surprised as she saw Sandu's grandfather. She didn't expect to see him at all. Dr. Hao continued to massage the old man's rough back. He tried his best to heal him. Lin Hao was sweating profusely. Sweat flowed in streams without stopping for a moment. Steam flew out of his mouth. Jolan wanted to say something to the doctor, but he interrupted her, telling her to save the talking for later. He asked her to wipe his sweat. The nurse wondered. Lin Hao had already been massaging the old man for 20 minutes, and the screaming had stopped. What kind of methods were these anyway? The old man lay silently on the couch. The doctor asked the nurse to bring him a silver needle. He performed a series of actions and finally finished the medical procedures. He sat down on the floor and said that the treatment was over. Jolan began to wipe the sweat from the doctor's forehead, saying it was pouring off him. She asked, "Are these procedures so exhausting?" The old man said the doctor is weak, a little wrinkled, and already tired, although the body is still famously sore. Lin Hao told himself that he was more excited to treat the old chicken than him. He didn't say this to the old man since he knew his reaction ahead of time. The doctor pulled the silver needle out of the old man's back and told him he could go. He also reminded him not to forget to send the scroll. The old man said he asked for a shot of painkiller and he started giving him a massage. Does he take him for a fool? The doctor exhaled and told him to try lifting his arm up and tell me if it hurt. The man followed his request and was stunned. He exclaimed joyfully that his arm really didn't hurt anymore. He said that now his blood vessels seemed to have cleared up too. The doctor said that his head was not so good, but his eyesight was fine. The boy's words made the old man angry and he became indignant because he thought he was smart. Lin Hao said that he had cured the old man 80%, and if he wanted to heal himself to the end, he should cooperate with him. The old man happily agreed to this deal, asking what he should do. Lin replied that he should be polite to those around him and not be rude. He also advised the old man to play mahjong regularly to keep his brain sharp. He sternly emphasized that he shouldn't watch TV as he was already old. Yansu and Jolan watched and didn't understand what he was saying. The doctor asked the man to trust his words. The old man said he hoped he was telling the truth. The old man exclaimed, needless to say, if he cured him, he would personally hand him the scroll. The old man left. Lin told himself that he had exhausted him, but he would tell everyone about their clinic. He decided that now it was time to deal with all the remaining patients. One of the men said they had nothing serious, just kidney failure. Dr. Lin Hao finished with his patients and decided to enjoy a cup of strong coffee. He was glad to finally be able to rest. Suddenly, he was disturbed by a woman wearing pink glasses and a hat. She asked if anyone was here. Nurse Jolan wondered what today was like. All the misfortunes had fallen on their head. Lin Hao considered the appearance of this charming girl to be no misfortune at all. He asked who was she. Jolan replied to him that it was Liu Shichi, Fan Tong's wife, who was also a vicious and conniving person. Lin told the nurse, curious to see just how grumpy this woman could be. Jolan said you can't judge a person by their looks because the doctor seems nice, and then it turns out he's a pretty mean guy. The nurse also confessed that she had never seen a guy who was both bad and good like Lin before. Jolan said that Fan Tong just wants to pay back the money they owe him, but his wife wants to take away their house. Lin was surprised. The girl had a devilish look at the woman and asked Lin Hao to make her suffer. The guy was astonished. He asked if she was sure she wanted to do that. Jolan asked if he wanted to eat crab for dinner tonight, right? Lin was salivating and agreed to do the favor. Fan Tun asked his wife what she was doing here since she was going to the hospital. Jishi said that it was his third uncle who told her to come here, or else he threatened to break her leg. Fang said Dr. Hao is a great doctor. His wife started yelling at him, saying that he had spent $100,000 to get rid of the stench. She was very angry with her husband. Cece began to feel pain. Jolan told Fang that his wife didn't seem to be feeling well. The woman sat down in a chair and asked the doctor not to say anything and just examine her. Lin Hao was wary. He was trying to figure out why she had come here if she didn't trust him at all. The girl looked at him angrily and asked him to write her a prescription. Lin looked at her with bewilderment. He said she didn't need medication. Cece became angry as he did not even name her symptoms. She called him a common quack. Lin said she was having intermittent pains in her lower abdomen. He pointed her to the exit and told her that when the pains of hell started, it wouldn't be too late to go back. The woman was dumbfounded and asked how he knew about it. Lin Hao replied that as a doctor, it was easy for him to understand such a thing. He smiled slyly and said to himself that he had succeeded in getting the fish on the hook. The girl had taken the bait. The doctor told Saisa that if she followed all the instructions, they would soon get to the bottom of it. The woman looked at him unhappily and asked why should she believe him. He took a piece of paper and said that he had to test her urine with it first to rule out the possibility of an ectopic pregnancy. The doctor told the girl that if 2 stripes appear, then she is pregnant, and if 1, then there is no ectopic pregnancy. Cheese took a test and said it only showed 1 stripe, so she's not pregnant. Lin Hao said that appendicitis could also be ruled out. Before he could say anything, the nurse pinched him. She corrected him, telling him that the appendix needed to be thoroughly checked. The doctor was in shock from the pain. He told himself that female enmity is a very terrible thing. He looked unhappily at the nurse. Lin asked Sisa to undress, saying he needed to examine her stomach. The woman started screaming, how dare he try to molest her. A dumbfounded Jolan told the woman that she didn't need to take everything off, just lift up her blouse. Lin said it was a simple illness, but if she didn't want to cooperate, let her look for someone else. Fantong shouted that there was no need to undress. Sisi looked angrily at her husband and told him to shut up because it wasn't really any of his business. She told him to get out and not interfere with her examination. The doctor was pleased, even though she was only cooperating to spite her husband. Sisi began unbuttoning her adorable blouse. She grudgingly asked the doctor to examine her faster. Lin Hao looked at her charmingly and said to himself that she wasn't as young as Jolan, but she had a beautiful body. Sisi lay down on the couch and pulled her skirt down seductively. She asked why he was standing there doing nothing. A furious Jolan said she would pay today for making their family sell the house. The doctor asked the woman to turn around so he could examine her side as nothing was clear. The girl asked why she should take this pose. The doctor told her not to ask a lot of questions if she didn't know. Jolan was watching all of this from the side. She said that the woman even had charming panties. She told Lin Hao to teach her a lesson. The doctor felt the girl and said she had a lump in the lower left side of her abdomen. Sisi immediately became wary and asked what was wrong with the seal. She began to tremble with fear. The woman immediately jumped up from the couch and asked the doctor to help her. Her eyes opened wide with fear. Lin Hao said that it was just a sigmoid intestinal blockage, so one injection and she would be fine in 3 days. Sisi began to shout that it was too much and asked if it could be cured in 1 day. Lin said then he would have to give an enema. The woman immediately became alert and afraid. She was very afraid to have an enema. The nurse started yelling at the doctor. She said that she would have to undress for the enema. Is he really such an impudent lecher? Sisi made up her mind and said it didn't matter because the sooner the better. Lin asked the nurse if she knew how to give an enema. She said she would take the patient away and told him not to dare enter. Jolan gave her an enema and said that retribution was over. She asked Sisa to stop thinking about all sorts of nasty things. Feng Tong excitedly asked his wife how she was feeling and what was she doing in the bathroom for so long. Sisa was feeling nauseous. She nervously answered him that she would live and he could ask the doctor about the rest. Lin Hao said that she was now healthy, and she would only be charged 2,500 yuan for the treatment. Jolan was dumbfounded by this amount. Fantong was surprised and said that it was very cheap. Sisi asked, wasn't he happy about it? Dr. Lin Hao added that a woman should not make love after eating, because in addition to relapse, it can lead to infertility. She yelled at her husband, saying it was all because he couldn't stand it every time after eating. Fantong said frustratedly that they had been unable to have a child for many years, and asked if he could help them. Lin Hao replied that he could help. Jolan began to understand why he had set such a small price. After all, it was a bait to lure their attention for the future. The doctor said that all the problems with conception were due to making love after eating. He asked if there was no other time to do it. Fang Tong said that if they had a child, 80 square meters of uncle's land would belong to them. The doctor told them to go home, get a good night's rest, and come back to him in a couple days. The woman said there was one, but she was wary and a little perplexed. Lin Hao said there was no buts and asked them to leave as he wanted to enjoy the crabs that Jolan had prepared. Fantong asked his wife to forget what she wanted and leave at the doctor's request. Yansu didn't understand what was going on. She started yelling. How could they start eating on their own and yet not call her? She was offended. Jolan Yihao was enjoying the crabs. Lin said that her body was still weakened and she could not have crabs. He asked to see the healthy Jolan, saying she could have crabs. Yansu said with disgust and anger that the nurse was all makeup. Jolan wondered, how could she say such a thing out loud? Lin Hao realized that he was once again in the middle of a female feud, and he had better stay away. The nurse proved that she didn't use makeup. Yan didn't believe her. Jolan asked the doctor not to run away and prove her right. Lin Hao's phone suddenly received a notification. He decided to read the message. He was surprised, for it was a message from Mr. Shen. The girls were fighting behind his back. The master wrote to him that Zilatine has been released for health reasons. The medical report says she is pregnant, but something is not right here. Suddenly someone called the landline. Lin wondered who could have called it. It had never happened before. Jolan picked up the phone and asked the man to speak more slowly. She was wary. She was thrown into shock. Her eyes filled with fear and tears. She said her father had crashed into someone. Lin Hao grabbed his head and realized that he should have known better. He began to humble himself. Lin immediately went to investigate the situation. He was driving his car and shouted that he saw them. The man with the mohawk said that Zhen Yao ran over their friend. He began to demand 500,000 yuan for damages. Suddenly Lin intervened and said to let the old man go. The man asked, "Who is he anyway?" The doctor grabbed the man's hand that was holding the old man. He began to apply pressure. The man let go of his arm in pain. He started yelling that this old man had run over his friend and asked who he even was. Lin Hao gave the man a serious look and said that this was his family. He told the man not to dare to touch him. Zhen Yao was both surprised and told himself that he was a loser, and this was the first time someone had helped him, and it looked like Lin would be a good match for Zhou Lan. Zhou Lan asked Uncle Yan what had happened. He said that they were coming back from fishing, and suddenly this guy threw them under the car. The guy threw himself under the wheels of the car and started screaming that his leg was broken. He was screaming for help as hard as he could. Yan said that a bunch of people immediately came out from behind the trees and started demanding compensation, but her father told them that it looked like cheating. The man told Lin Hao that no matter who he was, injuring one of them would make him pay for it. Lin menacingly asked him what would happen if he refused to pay. His gaze was brave. The man nervously asked him where did he come from. Lin replied that it was from the village of Stone. Bandit asked, "So that means he's not in a gang?" Lin asked, "Which means they're in some kind of gang." One of the bandits exclaimed and pointed a finger that Lin had no idea what they could do. Lin Hao didn't tolerate his antics and grabbed his index finger. The boy immediately blushed in pain. He said there was no one else in the Minju area except the Green Gang, so where else would they be from? He threatened that the man had better behave himself, or he would dislocate his associate's finger, then set it right and dislocate it again. The guy with the dislocated finger asked, "Does he really know about the Green Gang?" Lin replied that he also knew the landlord and Xia Shi. The green-haired bandit didn't believe that he knew the young leader Juni Tang. He asked him not to talk nonsense. The guy yelled for him to stop provoking Lin Hao because he would dislocate his finger. The man said that no one cared about that. He said that no one walks here and there are no security cameras, so even if he blackmails him, Hao won't be able to prove anything. Lin Hao was cold-blooded. Hearing this even pleased him in a way. He said that since there are no cameras, it means that he is also free and can do whatever he wants. The red-haired bandit asked him, did he really think he could handle everyone? Lin Hao decided not to waste time on idle talk. He delivered a sharp fist strike to the green-haired guy's jaw. He also launched a series of successful attacks on the remaining bandits. They were weak, and after a few minutes they were lying on the pavement. One of the bandits said that they should call for help. This did not scare Lin Hao. He said that he was ready to kill all of them, and preferably even the landlord at once. A frightened Zhou Lan asked the guy to leave while the bandits escaped. The green-haired man shouted that he had memorized their numbers and would find them. Lin Hao stepped on his head and told him to shut up. The bandit was passed out. I asked the boss of the bandits if they couldn't handle such an easy case. He was angry. One of the bandits shouted into the phone that it wasn't their fault, and the enemy was too strong and they couldn't handle him. The boss was huge. His back was broad. He told his subordinates to take their guns and follow him. Lin Hao looked at his opponents with a smile on the outside and said that he had finally waited for them. The boss asked the red-haired cowardly kid, who was the strong guy. Lin realized that this black guy was their ringleader. The ringleader menacingly said that he was unlucky to meet him. He told Lin Hao to prepare to say goodbye with at least one leg. Hao wasn't scared and said that he would only use one arm and one leg, and if that one could touch him, then he had won. The big guy was angry at the kid and didn't waste any time. He immediately tried to strike with his fist. Lin Hao was as agile as ever. He sharply dodged the blow and swung at the big man with his fist. He struck a powerful and lightning-fast blow at the bandit leader. He was unable to defend himself and fell unconscious. Lin Hao, after defeating his opponent, coldly asked, "Who wants to be next?" The other bandits were dumbfounded because their boss had been defeated in a couple of seconds. One of them said that his wife was in labor and ran away in fear, but behind Lin Hao's back was a big man who had come to his senses. He called him too arrogant. The young doctor coldly took his hand and squeezed it. The thug's eyeballs nearly popped out from the pain. Lin told the bandit to call the landlord and tell him to bring 500,000. The bandit asked if he was threatening their gang. Hao said that yes, he was right. He asked if he could make the call now. He twisted the big guy's finger. The latter could barely hold back tears of pain. The bandit leader told Lin not to even think about being scared of him. The guy started to right himself and dislocated his finger. The bandit screamed in pain and said that this guy was the real devil. Lin said he knew how to show people fear and could do it forever. Suddenly, a loud police siren began to wail. It was clearly audible. Lin Hao warily asked who had called the police. He began to feel nervous. Zhen Yao showed his phone with a smile, which had the number of the police dialed. Lin asked, could he have done something normal for once? The bandits were glad the police had arrived. The charming policewoman asked who had called her. She was complaining about the heat. Lin Hao recognized her and asked if she remembered her. He remembered that they had saved a pregnant woman together. The girl took off her sunglasses, trying to recognize the guy. He asked, wondering if she didn't remember him. He cheerfully said that she was the traffic police girl who settled the accident situation. One of the thugs nervously told the boss that it looked like the guy knew the policewoman. The boss said it wasn't a problem and he wouldn't run away. Zhenyao watched all of this from the sidelines. He wondered how Lin could be familiar with so many people. After all, he was always at home. Jolun recognized the policewoman. Her father said that she should keep an eye on Lin Hao and not let other girls seduce him. The girl immediately started yelling at her father. She asked what he was even talking about, and maybe it would be better to solve the current issue first. The bandit ringleader was asking the cop for help, saying that this guy is a thug who bullied him and broke his arm many times. The policewoman looked at him in surprise and asked him how he was doing it if his arm was fine. Lin Hao was acting innocent. The bandit claimed that he had dislocated his fingers and set them right. The policewoman said that first of all, there was no evidence, and secondly, she was from the traffic police. The girl said she was only here to investigate the accident. The wide-eyed bandit said he was ready to tell her everything. She asked if he was a victim. The bandit replied that he was not a victim, but he knew something. The girl told him to get out of here and called the injured man. Zhenyao said he was driving and asked to be allowed to explain everything. It was a hot day. The sun was really warming the ground. The investigation continued. Lin Hao said to himself, "There are no cameras here, everyone has their own story, this is bad for them." The policewoman told him that there was no evidence that he was guilty. Hao suggested sending the victim to the hospital because that's the rule. The policewoman heeded the guy's advice. They took the victim to a hospital in Guangzhou City. The girl asked Dr. Lin what was he going to do. She was wary. Lin asked, how did she know his name? He was surprised, for they didn't know each other. The girl said she had been looking for him for over a month until Mr. Shen told her about him. Hao realized that he shouldn't underestimate the police officers. Suddenly, Mr. Shen appeared. He asked Dr. Lin what he was doing here. Hao greeted him and said he was glad to meet him. One of the thugs told the leader that the guy had a lot of friends among the cops, and he was nervous. The leader told him not to worry. It didn't matter how many people were on his side. The main thing was that his brother had a broken leg. Shen asked Black Bear if he could stop causing him problems. The bandit leader told the gentleman that his friend had a broken leg. He declared that Shen couldn't ignore it because he was a policeman. Shen said that they could decide things legally or privately. Lin asked him to do his job. The master and Black Bear looked at Dr. Lin Hao with great bewilderment. Shen asked why he was doing this since he was trying to help him. The nurse asked who would pay the medical expenses. Black Bear started pointing his finger at Lin Hao and declared that he would be the one to pay. The nurse asked the boy to follow her. Lin fell in love with him at first sight and wondered, what would they name the baby? The girl asked why he was frozen in place. Hao asked if he could look at the x-ray. He scrutinized the picture and said it happened just as he thought it would. He asked the girl if it was an old fracture. The girl frightenedly replied that yes, and it was not the first time this man had come to them. Lin Hao said that if the fracture didn't heal properly, there would be spasms, and the guy's leg had already been broken for half a month. Black Bear was proving that the leg was broken because of this accident. The nurse said, Lin is right and the leg was broken even before that. The bandit said that since the old one hadn't healed yet, their hit and run had only made things worse, so the 500,000 compensation was justified. Lin Hao was prepared for these words. He took out a phone from his pocket that had the conversation recorded on it. The bandits were immediately in a stupor. The bandit with the mohawk immediately became angry. He asked how dare he record the conversation. Shen said that the deception was exposed, so they would have to follow him to the station. Lin Hao said that it was very funny to hear a rogue say something like that. Bear told the guy that he wouldn't feel good when the landlord found out about it. The policewoman said Lin beat them splendidly. Mr. Shen told the doctor that he was taking the criminals to the station for investigation. They said goodbye. The nice policewoman asked the doctor if he would like to have a bite to eat at her house. Hao suggested another time, since he had business at the clinic. She said she was going to pull his car out, but then she'd have to do it next time if he was busy. She asked mockingly, maybe he didn't want to leave his nurse? Lin said that was nonsense. He looked into the policewoman's eyes and boldly said he was ready to go with her right now. Lin Hao told Zhen Yao standing in front of him that he would go get the car. The old man looked at him angrily. He told the guy not to get hot about the girl flirting with him. That blew the guy's mind. He asked what the old man was even talking about. Zhen Yao asked him to look at her and asked, wasn't it obvious? The girl said that she would wait for Lin Hao outside. He asked the old man not to think anything of it, saying he would just take the car and go home. Zhen Yao shouted that he shouldn't stay out late, and he and Jolan would wait for him. The girl asked her father to stop. It was a warm, sunny day. The policewoman told Lin Hao that they had finally arrived. She called the elevator. Lin said the house is big, she must be rich. The girl replied that rich people drive a BMW X6. Lin Hao got embarrassed and said that he didn't even know what to say to that. The girl made him feel shy. The guy said she had a very cozy place and it was an example for other houses. The girl said she would take a shower and he could look around. She asked him where he was going. He said that she had given him permission to look around. The girl said they had just met and asked him not to act as if. He asked as if they were together. The girl was embarrassed and said yes without thinking. She came to her senses and said he was fooling her again. Lin asked to leave it at that and told the girl to go swimming. She said she liked the way he was trying to be cool. The girl began to take a shower. She did it for an interminably long time. It was as if time had stopped for the guy. Lin Hao told himself that it was very difficult to wait for the girl from the shower, because it was as if she was sleeping there. He told himself that he was not God, but only a helpless man. He did not know how he could bear such a trial. The girl's wet feet stepped on the floor. She abruptly finished her water treatment. The girl asked what was the matter and if Lin Hao was hungry. She said that she would prepare something right away. The boy was mesmerized by her beauty. She was wearing a dazzling house dress. It was very short. Lin recognized that she was very tempting. He had almost fallen into this trap. He could barely contain himself. A cute girl asked what her guest would like to eat for lunch. She looked gorgeous. Lin Hao didn't think about the question. He said without any hesitation that he wanted the crab. The girl said he had high demands and she only had noodles. Lin asked, did she really invite him for that? On the table were 2 sausages, 2 eggs, and 2 packs of instant noodles. Lin Hao said that he was about to show her how to properly cook instant noodles. She wondered, could eggs really be fried? Guy said he had finished cooking. The kitchen smelled really good. It was fried noodles with egg and sausages. The girl immediately tasted the dish he had prepared. She enjoyed it to the fullest. Her face was more than satisfied. She enthusiastically asked how the guy managed to make ordinary noodles so delicious. Lin calmly told her to take her time and eat calmly. He also said that she could have his portion. The girl ate and said with a smile that she was very sleepy on an empty stomach. Hao told her to rest and he would be on his way. When the guy was already walking towards the exit, the charming girl shouted at him to stay. He asked why he should stay since she was tired. She replied that it was the first time she had invited a man so he could not leave so easily. Lin Hao looked at her seriously and said to himself that she seemed to be a policewoman, but in reality she was a brigand. The guy held his head and asked the girl if she didn't have a boyfriend yet. The girl smiled sweetly at him and told him he had hit the mark. She really doesn't have a boyfriend. Lin said he couldn't believe that such beauty was disappearing. He asked what about him. The girl said his noodles are amazing. The guy gave her a sly smile and told her she was a prankster. The girl was puzzled. She asked what she had said. He said that now that she knew how good he was, would she deign to give him his car back? The girl said it was too early for that, and until he made her feel good, she wouldn't let him go. Lin warned her, saying that he was only selling his body, not his skills. The girl was angry because she didn't understand what he meant at all. Lin Hao had made a mistake. He corrected himself by saying that he was only selling his skills but not his body. The girl asked not to fool around. She asked the guy if he could give her a massage. Lin looked at her breasts and said to himself that although Jolan's breasts were bigger, she had a nice one too. He immediately said that she had found the right guy for this, and he would do anything to give her maximum pleasure. The girl was immediately excited. She was delighted, as she had wanted a pleasant massage for a long time. She couldn't wait for the procedures to start. Out of joy, she accidentally fell on the guy. He said he didn't expect her to be so eager. The madam asked him to give her a head massage. Lin Hao said he would do it without any problem. He rubbed his hands together and told her to just lay there and he would take care of everything else. The girl said she was in pain. She asked the guy to be more gentle. A little later, she asked him to massage her harder. She was delighted. Her pleasure was indescribable. She said it hurt, but at the same time it was very pleasant. Her behavior was turning the guy on too much. He wondered, did she really enjoy it that much? He said with a smile that her reaction was so unusual. He asked if this was her first time. She said it was because of his skill. The girl also said she didn't realize that in addition to being a talented doctor and chef, he was also an excellent massage therapist. Lin Hao decided to brag and said that he didn't want to lie, but there was nothing he couldn't do. The girl fell asleep in his lap. He was a little worried that she had just fallen asleep and that she might catch a cold. He decided to feel her pulse. He realized that it was not surprising that she had this condition and realized that this problem had been bothering her for a long time. Lin Hao was surprised at the girl's sound sleep, for he had not expected her to trust him so much at all. At one point, he wondered if things were slightly different, and she was just giving him a chance. Suddenly the girl opened her eyes. The boy exclaimed that she was finally awake. She immediately began apologizing for falling asleep on his legs, and now they were wet. The guy was uncomfortable. He said the main thing was that she had slept well, and it didn't matter if she had wet them. The girl said it was the best dream she'd had in a while, and suggested next time. But Hao said there would be no next time. The girl immediately exclaimed in surprise and asked why there would be no next time. He said he didn't know if he could hold back the next time she slept like that. She asked what he wanted to do. Lin took his eyes off her and decided to confess that while she was sleeping, he had secretly done something. The girl immediately asked warily, what did he do while she slept? He asked her to calm down and said he had checked her pulse. He said it must be annoying to her that her critical days are twice a month. The girl was completely amazed. She asked him in amazement how he had managed to find out about it. She admitted that it had been bothering her for a long time. Lin Hao said that it was no wonder she didn't have a boyfriend. The girl asked how could it have anything to do with not having a boyfriend. He asked how could he survive half a month without lovemaking. The girl immediately became wary and asked what was even in his head and how could he be thinking about that. Lin asked with a serious face, she must be having chest pain on top of everything else? He asked her to let him touch her to make sure. The girl started yelling at him to stay away from her. The girl asked the guy frustratedly, was he really leaving already? She gently held his hand. Lin Hao said that she could come to the clinic any time, but now it was late and he had to go. She asked if he wouldn't stay the night. He asked if she really wanted him to spend the night. Would he really be able to lose his virginity? The girl sweetly told him that she too was still a virgin. He asked why don't they share their first experience together, but she just threw the keys to the door in his face, telling him to hurry up and leave. Lin Hao said he was leaving in such a case and asked him not to miss him. The girl told him to leave as long as he could walk. He laughed at her, telling himself that the old virgin was angry and it was time to leave. He said goodbye to her and left. There was a mesmerizing and wonderful sunset in the city. The sky was a purple hue. Lin was on his way home. He was puzzled as to where in the stone village there might be people with his surname. He decided to ask Uncle Yan about it. Lin Hao finally returned to the clinic. Jolan greeted him and asked if he had had dinner. He said to himself that Sophie had eaten all his wonderful pasta. He replied that he hadn't had dinner. The village head greeted Lin Hao. He invited him to the table, saying that he was also dining with them tonight. Lin told Uncle Yan that he wanted to ask him something. The head asked if he was the lost child of the Lin family. Uncle Yan was shocked. He said that he knew it. Otherwise, why would a guy stay in this wilderness with such talent? Lin Hao, with a serious face, asked him to keep this information secret, saying that he trusted the head. The head promised not to tell anyone, and said that the Lin family's ancestral estate had been destroyed, and most of the family had emigrated. He continued the story, saying that there weren't many people with that surname left in the village. Lin was stunned. Yan Su suddenly called out to him. Dr. Lin Hao withdrew. He looked at the girl in surprise and waited for her to say what she wanted to say. Yan Su walked up to him and said that she heard what they were talking about with the village head. Lin was immediately wary. He told her that no one could know about it, and if she blabbed, he threatened to drag her up the mountain and rape her. Yan Su calmly said that she didn't need to threaten after all. She knows how to keep her mouth shut. She said that now that she knew the doctor's secret, she understood why he was acting so strangely. Lin asked what conclusion she had drawn. She said his childhood trauma was to blame. The turmoil he experienced as a child left an imprint on his psyche. Lin Hao asked, in that case, why isn't she scared to be alone with him? And wasn't she afraid that he would do something terrible to her? Yan Su gave him a sly smile and told him to just let him try. She said that not only men can rape. Lin Hao immediately stood in a stupor. He wondered, how could it be that a man could be raped by a woman? He decided to provoke the girl by saying that he didn't believe in her blabberings. He accused her of bluffing. The girl offered him a bet, and if he dared to sleep with her, he would be with her for the rest of his life until he died. Lin Hao was immediately wary and wondered if he should agree. Yan Su asked, was he really scared? Lin said that enough of all this idle talk, after all, arguing wouldn't benefit him. Yan Su immediately said that the guy didn't have any courage. Lin Hao replied that you can't feed yourself with courage. He said she could do what she wanted, and he would go to his place. The girl told herself that she would not let him escape. Lin Hao opened the door to his room and was shocked. On his bed lay Yan Su. He asked warily what she was doing in his room and why she was lying on his bed. The girl started complaining that she had spent the whole day at the clinic and now her whole body ached. Dr. Lin said he had warned her earlier to exercise. Yan Su said that she had a very good time last time. She asked if he could do it again today. Lin was pleased in his heart. The girl asked him if he didn't want to give her a massage. It was like she was up to something. Lin Hao told himself that he shouldn't fall for the provocation. He couldn't fall into her trap so easily. He said he didn't want that because he would have to work and she would have to rest. The girl said that this was the original plan. She called him pathetic and asked him to name his price. Lin said that for less than 80 yuan he wouldn't do anything. Yansu agreed to his request. She said that she was now his mistress and asked him to satisfy her as soon as possible. The doctor started to massage Mistress and asked if she liked it. She said that she did not like this position very much. He made concessions to her and got his knees on the bed, hoping it would be better. The girl said it still wasn't. She stated that he had to sit on top of her, or she would simply continue to be uncomfortable. The doctor pretended he was not happy about what he was hearing. The girl told him to stop pretending and get on top of her. Yan said that during his drug treatment he touched her everywhere. How can he be embarrassed now? Lin Hao replied to her that it was completely different after all. Gender was irrelevant to a doctor. He said that Yan Dong and Gege didn't complain about it. He asked why they all had the same last name. Yansu replied that they were all from the same family. She added that they were from different generations. She was from the 15th and they were from the 16th, and technically they should call her aunt. Yansu exclaimed for the guy to stop changing the subject and started massaging her body. Dr. Lin asked why at some unknown point had the girl become so harmful. He carefully massaged her body and asked her if she liked it. Yan replied that it was pretty good. She asked not to push hard as it hurt. Lin told himself that it was easier to please her than Sophie. Suddenly, from fright, Dr. Lin Hao almost fell off the girl. Someone started calling out with shouts. They were wary. Yan seemed familiar with that voice, and the doctor wondered who could have come at this hour. It turned out to be the little boy Xiaolong. Yansu asked him to speak more slowly so that she could understand what was wrong. He was in a panic. His eyes were in tears. The boy was screaming that she should look at everything herself. He said his aunt was bleeding. They traveled to the place the boy had led them to. Lin realized that it was not far from Jolan's house at all. He was very surprised, for he had brought them to a pregnant woman. The woman was screaming in pain. Lin Hao realized that the woman's water had broken, and it was urgent to deliver her baby. He asked her why she had not called an ambulance. The woman replied that she had no money to go to the hospital. The boy said that yesterday their uncle took the last 200 yuan from them. Yansu yelled that she needed to go to the hospital, and Hao said it was too late. A frightened Su asked the doctor if he could deliver the baby. He asked who, if not him, would do it. Jolan said it was bad luck to deliver a baby without being married. She was scared. He replied that it was not a time for superstition as a man's life had to be saved. He asked for warm water and scissors. The doctor told the woman that he would now have to remove her underwear to locate the infant. Suddenly, the woman's husband appeared and started screaming and asking what this creep was doing to his wife. He didn't bother to look into the situation and struck a blow to the doctor's jaw without warning. Lin asked, "Where did that idiot come from?" A man sat down beside his wife and asked how she was feeling. She asked what he was doing here and why did he hit the doctor. The man was amazed and asked if this lowly man was the doctor who would deliver his wife's baby. He said they didn't need his help and started kicking him out. The woman told him to leave and asked the doctor to ignore him. Lin Hao said that if they dragged on a little longer, the woman and child would die. The man agreed to get out and stay out of the way. The doctor yelled at him to get out of the office, saying he was only making them lose time. He nervously began to deliver the woman's baby. The woman was pushing as hard as she could. The doctor was nervous because you can't do a C-section in this position. The only thing left to do is an external rotation. Dr. Lin Hao was getting more and more nervous. He said that this kind of effort was not enough. A husband was holding his pregnant wife. The doctor yelled at her to bite him and keep pushing. The woman was screaming as hard as she could. She was biting her husband's hand. Blood was already gushing from it, but her husband told her to go on because it was all his fault. Sweat from stress dripped from the doctor's face non-stop. Finally, he said that she had given birth and praised her. The loud crying of a newborn baby was heard throughout the house. The baby's cries could be heard even outside the house. Lin Hao said that they had a baby boy. The man congratulated his wife and the woman thanked the doctor. The doctor calmly exhaled and told the new parents to wait for the ambulance to arrive. The next day, the unexpected happened. Lin Hao's sound sleep was interrupted by Nurse Jolin's shout. Lin jumped out of bed and ran out into the lobby of the clinic. The nurse asked why he was up so late. He apologized. Lin Hao sat down at the table and began to work with the patients. He told the woman to follow the instructions and everything would be fine. The doctor told himself that he had never gone to bed this late before. He complained of fatigue. Suddenly, he remembered that he had some one thing planned for today. He told Jolan that he promised Uncle Yan to come to the village committee yesterday and asked her to take care of the clinic. In her mind, she said that she hoped he would be able to find his family. Lin was surprised to see such a luxurious committee building in such a poor village. The head of the village was negotiating with his subordinates. Suddenly he saw Lin Hao and rejoiced. Lin said that if he was still in a meeting, he could wait outside. Village head. Yan said that he wasn't interrupting them since the meeting was already over. He decided to seize the opportunity. The head introduced Lin Hao to the staff. He said that he had impressive skills in medicine and had managed to cure his illness. Fan Qiang, the deputy head, turned to the head, saying that if nothing else, he would leave. Yan replied for him to take care of his personal matters. Lin Hao was a little angry since the deputy head was ignoring him. He looked at him angrily. Fan Qiang condescendingly looked him in the eyes, saying to himself that this guy looked very insolent. Lin calmly said that if Qiang goes to eat, he had better give up alcohol or his liver might not be able to take it. The man became angry. He immediately turned around and told him that it was none of his business, and asked who was he to even point. Lin asked him not to get angry. Lin asked, because he often had pain in his lower abdomen, loss of appetite and weight, and constant fatigue plagued him. The man was stunned and asked how did he know. Lin said that his love of drinking led to liver steatosis. Deputy Melian said that the doctor is excellent at what he does. She asked if he could determine if she had a problem with her body. He said it was a simple thing to do. In his mind, he said to himself, the woman looks rich, so it's time to make some money. He said she has abdominal bloating, hiccups, heartburn, and constipation, and she is often hungry because if she overeats, she gets a stomach ache. The woman was amazed and said to herself that this young man really knows his business. She asked if it could be cured. The doctor said it was just a minor stomach problem and asked her to come to the clinic. The woman calmed down and said she would come over as soon as possible. Yan said that all health problems can be solved by Hao's talents. The village head said that everyone could disperse, and he had something to discuss with Lin Hao. Lin asked Uncle Yan if he had found anything. He replied that he could tell that they had already found a clue. He asked the kid to be patient as he would tell everything a little later. Lin told him to take his time. He thanked the head of the village, saying that he was now indebted to him. His uncle asked him if he had had lunch yet. He suggested we eat first, since he had bought food, and then he would show the two Lin families who stayed in the village. Lin happily agreed. The head of the village asked Mrs. Chun if she was really taking care of Senior Lin again. The woman asked the head what brought him here. He said it was nothing serious. He just wanted to know if a child had gone missing from their family about 14 or 15 years ago. Miss Chun replied that she wasn't sure about that, and promised to ask her husband when he returned. Lin asked if Uncle Lin knew anything about it. Miss replied that he knows more than her husband, but he suffered a stroke and now he can't even take care of himself and they don't have the money to treat him. Lin Hao said that she didn't have to worry, and he would cure the old man for free. The woman was surprised. She asked who he was. Yan introduced him as Lin Hao, the village's new doctor. He said that his medical skills were amazing and since he promised, he would do it. Hao asked Miss Chun if the headaches and tinnitus had been bothering her lately. She was surprised to say that she had, and asked how he knew. The doctor said the symptoms were quite noticeable, and asked if he could check her pulse. The woman gave him the opportunity. Auntie Chun extended her hand to the young specialist so that he could diagnose her. He diagnosed a duodenal ulcer. He told her to come to the clinic with Senior Lin, where he would take care of their illnesses. Lin didn't bother the woman any further since he and his uncle still had business to attend to. The woman said she would come as soon as she could. Yan asked since when did the guy start treating people for free. Lin replied that although he liked money, he still had principles. He asked the village head if it was a mistake. Uncle Yan said it's not a mistake, it's the last family with the surname Lin. Hao said that yesterday in this house, he helped a woman give birth to a baby and they never paid. Yan said that was too rash an act. The head said that the owner of the house is called Lin Shitian, and his wife is Su Qing. His family was the most famous in the village. Hao said that he was an alcoholic. Uncle was surprised because Shitian was different before. He said that it was very sad, but Su Qing was still loyal to him. He said Lin Shitian had been a talented artist since childhood and became famous early on, but his prosperity came to an end after a terrible accident. There were 11 people in the families, but after the accident, only 3 remained, Lin, Su, and her brother Su Lun. Moreover, Shitian's hands were injured. Entering the room, Lin Hao asked Madame Su Qing how did she feel after giving birth. She was glad to see the doctor and thanked him for visiting her. She said she seemed to have forgotten to pay for his help. He told her not to worry about the money and said he came to talk to Mr. Lin. Su frustratedly replied that he had gotten drunk again. Qing said that since he quit painting, he has been drinking all day long. She truly believes that he will pull himself together, so she is loyal to him. She said with a sad face that in the end it was the best thing she could do for him. Lin said that the head told him his story. Dr. Lin Hao said that he thought Mr. Lin no longer loved Sue, so he was obsessed with drinking and gambling. She yelled that none of this was true because they made a vow to always love each other. Hao said it was obvious that the man was only thinking about himself. The girl cried in tears that it was nonsense, but Lin proved her wrong, saying that her husband had been missing during the birth. He shouted that Lin was just feeling sorry for himself since he couldn't paint, and if he loved her, he would do anything to make her feel good. The girl said in tears that maybe he was right. Lin Hao said he was glad that he finally realized it. He said that if her husband would pull himself together, let him come to the clinic and he would help him with his hands. The girl said she believed in her husband. Drunken Lin woke up and started calling for his dear wife to come to him. Su Qing said she could no longer tolerate his constant drinking and did not want to live like this. She demanded a divorce. The man panicked and started begging his wife not to leave him. He promised to provide a better life and asked if she believed in him. She screamed that he'd been turning into nothing since he quit painting, and if it wasn't for her, he'd have died a long time ago. She said an irresponsible man like him didn't deserve her. How could she believe in him after that? The man started crying. He tearfully asked to be given another 3 months. Su Qing agreed, saying that Dr. Lin had promised to help him with his hands. Shityan cried, and kneeling on his knees promised that she would do her best for her. She told herself that she hoped he would really change his life. Suddenly, the deputy head came into the clinic. He called for the doctor and asked to see him. Lin Hao, at the same time, was chatting with Nurse Jolan. He was happy to see Mr. Fang. Fan started to say that last time Hao diagnosed him with liver steatosis, and he went to the hospital to check. Lin asked to be calmer. He was frightened and said he had severe steatosis, and if not operated on it could progress to cirrhosis. He asked for help. Lin said that it was a trifling matter, but Fang needed to stop drinking first. He angrily replied that he definitely wouldn't do that because alcohol was his life. The doctor said that in such a case he could not help. The frightened man promised to quit drinking if there was no other solution. Lin asked the nurse if Fan Qiang was rich. She replied that he was even richer than Uncle Yan. She also added that in fact, he was just a regular rich cretin. She asked, is he really up to something? Lin replied that she had guessed. The doctor said that the disease could be cured, but it would cost Fan Yu 100,000. The man was angry because the hospital was much cheaper. Hao said that he is not forcing him, and he can go to the hospital. He also said that 100,000 for the sake of a healthy liver is pennies. Fan Qiang agreed to discuss it. He said that 100,000 was an acceptable amount and asked if he would definitely be cured. Lin said it was certain. Lin Hao had him sign a contract so that he wouldn't be tempted to run away after being cured without paying. Fan signed the contract and started to leave. In his mind, he said that if the doctor screwed up, his life would be turned into hell. Lin Hao watched the nurse admiringly. He told himself that she was beautiful as she concentrated on doing the medicine. He was very scared for Jolin as she had unintentionally cut her finger in the process. He immediately took her finger and put it in his mouth to stop the bleeding. He sucked her finger nicely. The girl was stunned by his action. She didn't know what to say to him. Lin asked her if her finger hurt. Jolan said that her finger didn't hurt. Lin Hao immediately took her cheek and decided to kiss her on the lips. Suddenly, their enjoyment was interrupted by Lin Shitian, who shouted to the doctor that he had realized everything. The doctor immediately became angry and wondered who dares spoil such a beautiful moment. Shichen said his wife taught him a lesson and he had an epiphany. He declared that he couldn't live like that anymore. He said he had heard that Dr. Lin could cure his hands. He said he didn't have the money now, but he would give it back later. Lin looked at him and said to himself that it looks like he still has a conscience. Since that's the case, let the past be the past. Hao said he would help as long as the man had the desire to change his life. Jolan asked if he would really help. Zhen Yao intervened and said that he was against it since Shitian's hands couldn't heal even overseas. He threatened that if the doctor failed, it would affect his reputation. Shitian said he wouldn't blame him if he failed. Jolan asked if his father didn't trust them. Zhen Yao replied that he did, but this chick doesn't know how dangerous human gossip is. Lin Hao said that he would take responsibility if he failed. He said he would do his best. Lin Shitian began to cry, saying that he must have been blessed in his past life. He said Dr. Hao was his savior. The doctor told Jolin that there would need to be surgery on his hands, so they would go and buy some instruments later. Zhen Yao said that young people are very reckless. He said he hoped nothing bad would happen. The evening came and it was already dark outside. Lin Hao said that it had been a busy day and decided to rest in the courtyard. Yansu sat in the courtyard and pondered. She didn't know what to do. Should she tell him? Lin Hao was fascinated by her beauty. He said that she looked sad and asked if she was thinking about her lover. She nervously told him to cut the crap. She said she didn't know how to tell him. She frustratedly admitted that she had actually accidentally broken his balls. Lin was shocked and asked how could she do such a thing. Lin Hao reached into his pocket to make sure. He said that she had deceived him because everything was in place. Yan sadly said that she had not deceived him. She confessed that she had accidentally broken the golden turtle eggs. Lin immediately became angry and asked what she was doing. He shouted that the eggs were worth a lot of money. She asked him not to get so angry and said she knew how expensive they were. She promised to pay him. The doctor's anger didn't stop. He said her apology sounded insincere. Yansu said she was admitting guilt. He angrily declared that she was so careless. He asked how she could be so careless if she wanted to raise turtles. He said that it looks like punishment for using illegal substances wasn't enough for her, so she needs to be taught a new lesson. Yansu started to be afraid of the doctor. She said he scares her when he shows that side of him. Furious Lin Hao told her to stop talking nonsense, be obedient and lie down. Yansu obeyed and lay down on the bed. She was scared and asked the doctor not to be too rough. Lin was surprised in his heart. After all, he wanted to scare her, but who knew she would take it seriously? He wondered if she was willing to do that. Lin Hao was drooling as the girl took a seductive pose. He wondered if this was really his chance. He began to teach Yansu a lesson. He spanked her mercilessly. The girl let out moans. Lin finished and said he was done with the parenting and now he would give her a massage. He told her not to move for he wanted to make her feel good. She said she didn't need a massage because she didn't want to wash her underwear again. Lin was dumbfounded and didn't know what she was talking about. She told him to go to bed because he had to have surgery tomorrow. She ran away. Lin Hao tried to stop her. He didn't understand anything at all. The girl ran away without explaining anything, although he only wanted to give her a massage. Dr. Lin Hao woke up and walked out of his bedroom. He yawned and was shocked by what he saw. There were many patients, all of them asking to be examined. Lin Hao was surprised by this influx of patients. He said he would help them all, but one by one. He decided to start with old Grandpa Pina. The patients respected the doctor's decision, so they didn't object. Everyone was willing to wait. Lin was surprised by the old man's problem. He asked the nurse to bring a set of acupuncture needles. Jolan brought him a set of games. The doctor immediately swung around and spread out a scroll of needles. He took the brain activation needle. Lin Hao skillfully inserted games into different points on Senior Lin's body. The old man's head was in needles. The doctor finally finished the procedure. He was even sweating, as he hadn't used this technique for a long time. Suddenly the old grandfather woke up. He exclaimed when he saw the red-haired deputy head of the village. He called her Sniveling Lian. The girl asked not to be called by that name. Miss Chun rejoiced, for her father could talk again. Lin asked her to take care of him as best she could. The doctor asked the others to get in line. He promised to examine everyone. Yansu reminded Jolan that the doctor had a surgery scheduled for today. The nurse remembered that he had to operate on Lin Shitian's arm. Jolan wondered why he hadn't come yet. Was he drinking and gambling again? Su said that it was quite possible. Lin Hao said that he believed that Shitian was serious about talking about wanting to start a new life. He said he would go to his house as he was wondering where he was. Lin asked the girls to prepare the operating room. Lin Shitian told Pangda that he would pay back the 2 million he owed, but he needed a little more time. Pangda wanted to take the painting and even pay 1 million extra on top. He said it was the perfect deal. Shitian said the painting wouldn't sell for any money. He said he had nothing left but his life. Su Qing asked Pangda to leave them alone since they had nothing else. The bandit said that Shitian had a beautiful wife. He offered her to be his wife for the rest of her life and leave the child to this invalid and live happily with him. She didn't ask what he was talking about. Lin Shitian's head snapped up. He shouted and swore at the bandit to get out of their house and not to touch his wife. The bandit said he was the one who had to get out of here, and his wife now belonged to him. He ordered his bodyguards to capture Lin Shitian and then massacre him. Suddenly Hao walked through the door. The bandit asked who he was and why he was breaking into someone else's house. He answered him that he himself was in someone else's house. Lin Hao said that he seems to have understood everything, and this red-haired rascal is the villain. He called his men complete yucks as he interrupted every single one of them, even though he wasn't even fighting at full strength. The bandit became furious and threatened to make him suffer. He swung his fist, but Lin intercepted the blow. He said he would make him suffer. Lin Hao felt an unbearable pain. The young guy had hurt him a lot. The pain made him stick his tongue out. His arm was dislocated. The bandit said his cousin was the leader of the Green Gang, and now the guy's definitely dead. Lin Hao said that no one cared about his Green Gang, and even Xia Shu wouldn't have the guts to treat him with such disrespect. Lin said he advised him to go to the hospital quickly, and if he didn't cure his arm in 3 days, he would be an invalid for life. The bandit was enraged. Shidian said that he couldn't even think what a great fighter Hao was. Su Qing thanked him for helping their family. Lin Hao said that this underdog would soon come to ask for his help. Qing asked if the doctor had come to take her husband in for surgery. The doctor said he was really after Shit Yan. He said they had to hurry to the clinic. They sent him there without wasting any time. The doctor and the patient hurriedly reached the clinic. It was a warm and sunny day. Lin Hao said that the anesthesia was done. Now the operation could begin. Jolan admired because he even knows how to perform anesthesia. He said he wasn't talented at everything because he couldn't give birth. He asked if she would help him. She asked angrily if he could be serious. Lin agreed to be serious. He said that there was a very difficult matter to be dealt with now. He told himself that although the injury was serious, it would be okay if he could stitch up the nerve, and after that, he should stitch up the skin of the muscle. The doctor was intense and very attentive in his work, sewing up the patient's nerve. Sweat was streaming out of him as he was very nervous. He asked Jolan to let him wipe the sweat on her breasts. She immediately let him do so. Lin Hao asked Brother Shitian how he was feeling. He said that the injury to his right arm wasn't that serious and the surgery was completed. Shit Yan nervously said he forgot to tell the doctor, but he's left-handed and paints pictures with his left hand. The angry doctor asked why he hadn't told him about it earlier. The nurse reassured him by saying that she had not warned him because she did not know. He calmed down and told the nurse that it wasn't her fault, because he was the one who hadn't checked everything beforehand. He pulled himself together and said that Lin's left arm was much more damaged, and he would need her help. She agreed to help. Night had fallen and it was already dark outside. The operation had been long and arduous, but it was finally over. Jolan excused herself to the restroom. Lin thanked her for her help. He told himself that the operation had lasted 9 hours. She had probably been patient for a long time. The nurse sat in the bathroom and told herself that the operation was complicated, and if it wasn't for Lin Hao, she probably would have fainted from the shock. She told herself that he looked erotic when he was doing the surgery. She pushed those thoughts away from her and decided she needed to check on things. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The girl opened the door, behind which stood Lin Hao. She was surprised. Lin said that they had completed the operation and he would clean everything up. He told her to go to bed, as he was obviously very tired. Jolan told him cheerfully that it was as if he had read her mind. She went to bed. Lin said they would see each other later. Shichen and Lin went out into the corridor. They were surprised to see Su Qing standing there. She asked how the operation went. The doctor replied that everything was fine, but her husband wouldn't be able to use his hands for a couple of days, so she would have to help him. The doctor also emphasized that Brother Shit Yan needs to eat well, because the body needs to recover. Hao added that he needs to exercise daily, and most importantly never go back to drinking and gambling again. Shidian said that by trickery, Pang Da took many of his paintings and sold them profitably. He also wanted to take possession of his favorite painting of Qing bathing. The doctor said he was very curious about who this Panda was. He asked how Brother Lin knew him. He replied that it's a long story. Qing said that he was Lin's former manager. Shitian nervously said that he only cared about money. Hao said that he would teach that rascal a lesson. Su Qing said that if the doctor wasn't here, a terrible thing could have happened. Shityan started crying and said it was all because of his gambling addiction, and he's a loser who can't pay for the surgery. Hao said he didn't need to pay. Shitian asked, why was he so kind to him? He replied that maybe they were from the same family. Lin said he was kidnapped and sold as a child, but returned to his homeland to find his family. He said it was possible they were from the same family. A surprised Shitian said he didn't recall a child going missing in their village, but promised to ask his family about it. Lin Hao thanked Lin Shitian. The latter replied that he shouldn't worry, as he was only happy about it. The couple decided to leave, saying the doctor needed to rest after a long surgery. Qing told him to come and visit. Dr. Lin Hao said that if there were any problems, they could always contact him and wished them a safe journey. Lin thought of sending Sister Jolan home so that she too could rest after the operation. He entered the room where the charming Jolan was sleeping. He told himself that she was very beautiful when she slept. He began to push the vulgar thoughts away from him, telling himself that he needed to calm down immediately, lest he do something stupid. He began to rotate his head. He told himself that he couldn't do that to her while she was asleep, because it would only make sense if she was conscious. Lin lay down next to the charming Jolan. He told himself to go to sleep soon and keep himself in control. The nurse rolled onto her other side and felt someone near her and woke up. She didn't realize who it was, and as a consequence, she was frightened and shouted at the whole clinic that there was a maniac. Lin Hao asked her out of fright, what maniac was she talking about and where was he? Jolan realized that he was the one lying with her and said that he had scared her. He asked her with a smile on the outside of his face what was wrong. He told himself that he was sleeping on his side of the bed after all. Why such a reaction? Jolan looked carefully into his eyes as if suspecting something. She realized that he didn't seem to be lying. She wondered if perhaps she had rolled onto his side while she slept. Naughty thoughts began to pop into her head. She pushed the dirty thoughts away from her. Jolan immediately began asking the doctor why they were sleeping in the same bed. He replied that there was no other bed in the clinic, so he lay down with her. She asked with particular surprise how he could do such a thing. What would they tell their father if he saw them? Lin Hao smiled slyly and said that he thought her father would only be happy about it. Jolan asked him to stop talking about it. She said she was leaving for work and told him to come over too. Lin scratched the back of his head and wondered why she was so serious. Someone shouted for Hao to come over soon. He realized it was a familiar voice. He decided to hurry, for this could be important. He opened the door and realized whose voice it was. Standing outside the door was Pang Da and his minions. He asked Lin Hao what he had done to his arm and asked him to heal it. Dr. Lin smiled wryly and said that he could heal his arm without any problem, but he didn't know if he could afford it. Pang Da said that the hospital told him that he needed an operation, but it would not give any guarantees. He began to apologize to the doctor for his antics. Lin replied to him that if Pan gave him 1 million yuan, he would cure him without any repercussions. The bandit was outraged at what he heard and asked if he was kidding. Hao asked him what was more important to him, his hand or his money. Pang Da recalled the words of the doctor who said that even foreign experts couldn't help with this problem. He agreed to the sum of 1 million on the condition that he would pay off the doctor when his arm was fully recovered. Lin angrily asked him, "Is he bargaining with him?" He called Nurse Jolan over to him. The nurse was surprised by Pang Da's presence. She asked what he was doing here. Hao replied that he was here because of his hand and asked to check his phone. Pan shouted that if it didn't work out, the money would have to be returned. The doctor asked him to shut up and just transfer the money. Pang Da asked if they could start the treatment right now. Lin Hao said he would set his bone right now. He set the bandit's injured wrist in a sharp motion. He felt a sharp pain and cried out. Lin said that the operation was over and he could go away. Pan was dumbfounded and asked if he had charged him 1 million for it. The doctor menacingly told him to get out of here, and if he saw him again, more zeros would be added to the price. Evil Panda left and said that time would sort things out and threatened to come back. Suddenly, Mr. Shen appeared. He said he was very happy to see the doctor and he had something for him. Shen said that the case of those bandits was closed. Lin Hao wondered how it all ended. The gentleman replied that only 10,000. He said that in addition to that, the doctor would have to sign a civil compensation agreement. Lin Hao was upset as he had hoped for at least 80 to 100,000. Jolan said that it was also his father's fault with his terrible driving. The doctor signed the necessary agreement. Mr. Shen smiled and said that he was now free. Zhen Yao shouted to Lin Hao and Jolan that the food was ready and it was time to sit down at the table. The doctor was excited about the food. Lin asked the old man why the food was so unpalatable today. He told him that he should be thankful that it was there at all. Hao said to go to the mountains today to get herbs as it was necessary for Lin's hands. The old man was indignant because the operation was free. Jolan told his father that when Shidian's hands recovered, he would be able to make good money if he drew a picture for him. The old man said it was true, but first his hands had to recover. Hao asked if he didn't trust his medical skills. Zhen Yao told him to go get the herbs himself and he passed. Jolan told the doctor that she couldn't go with him either as she had some nuances. Lin didn't understand what she was talking about. The nurse was embarrassed to say out loud what was happening to her. She said that he understood everything. Hao still didn't understand anything. Yansu asked, "Is he really so stupid that he doesn't realize what kind of days girls have?" Jolan said that she would go home as she needed to rest. Lin Hao wished her a good rest. The doctor asked Yansu could she at least go with him. Otherwise he would have to go alone. Yan happily replied that she would go with him because she didn't want to see his sad face. He asked why she was so excited. Lin Hao and Yansu went to the mountains to get some medicinal herbs. The road was not easy, the girl whistled. The doctor asked her to stop whistling, as he now felt like doing the needle. She said that if he needed to take a dump, he could do it and she wouldn't stop him. The girl continued whistling. He asked her to stop whistling. He started yelling that if she kept doing it, he wouldn't be able to restrain himself anymore. Lin asked why she was making fun of him. Yansu said it was a joke, and if he needed to go to the toilet, he could go somewhere else. The doctor angrily told the girl that as soon as he stopped being rude, she would immediately become insolent. She asked him to pay attention to the stream. Yansu said that they would have to find another way. Lin Hao told her that they could cross the stream. He said the creek wasn't very deep and asked her to take off her shoes to start crossing. Yansu froze. She was mesmerized by something. Lin Hao couldn't understand everything that was happening. He asked her in surprise why she was silent. The girl did not answer his questions and stood still. Lin said that since it wasn't her, he would go first. He took off his shoes and began to carry them in his hands. He mockingly asked her not to say that he didn't take off his shoes because he was afraid the fish would die from the smell of her feet. Yansu shouted that it was his feet that smelled so stinky. She said she froze a little as the view here was very beautiful.